Everybody in the pool.
Okay, enough goofing around like that. How y'all doing? Welcome to, it took us a long time and a freaking global pandemic to get here. But we're here, finally. When did we originally say we were going to do this, to talk about the Judgment Night soundtrack and other things, and just life in general, life, love, philosophy, all that good stuff?
12 years ago.
Probably, yeah.
No. It was, I'm going to say it was 6 months ago to a year ago. Might have even been a year ago.
For sure.
But, yep. So this is Mr. Michael.
I am, Method Mike, because while Jack Nicholson under normal times he takes time off to go to Lakers games to be a grump, I'm method acting 24/7, 365, 365.25, trying to fit into society and be something I'm not.
I am Mummies on Main Street. The next thing you know, there'll be Mummies on Main Street.
Practically are already. I mean, we're about, that's June, May. What are we at now? We have killer wasps coming in, or something, killer hornets, or
Murder hornets. Yep.
Yeah, killer hornets coming in. Godzilla's gonna arrive soon. Galactus doesn't want to deal with this shit. He's like, yo, I don't want the heartburn, planet Earth.
Took a pass on this one.
Yeah, exactly. He's going vegan for a couple of months, or until this whole thing ends. But yeah, we're here. We're here to entertain, go down memory lane, and talk a little bit about various things. But before we get into it, first, how are you doing, Tim?
I'm doing well. Family and friends have so far so good, been safe in this pandemic. And so, yeah, I haven't lost my job, so I'm still getting a paycheck, thankfully. I have not much to personally complain about or be sad about right now, so I'm very thankful.
Awesome. Good stuff. I'm glad. Good stuff. Yeah, and so...
How about yourself?
Likewise, just very fortunate in this situation, as cliches. It just, working a day job and running a lot, losing weight, and just kind of working on my own personal game and getting ready for when we all go back to normal. So take the lessons learned and just go back and go at it like Dennis Rodman style, with that kind of intensity. So yeah, basically that's it. I'm glad, whether it's open mic night, which you did the other night, just other thing, whether it's writing, it's cool. While everyone's limited, it's cool. There are a lot of projects and people are kind of coming together, and we all as a society, we say we're gonna do stuff. Oh, I'll do this. I'll work on this art project, or I'll work on this novel I'm doing, or whatever it may be. We all have our own. I'll do this, or I will get to that. And it seems now, at least, the best out of a bad situation, everyone is able to kind of at least take some of those off their bucket list or their rainy day list and work on. And it's cool. Like, I did stand up the first time the other night, and that was a lot of fun.
Quick question. Are we recording this?
Yes.
Okay. You must be the one recording it.
Yes, sir.
We're still working out some of the kinks, folks.
This is a pilot. It's like Star Trek The Cage. I mean, Spock's going to smile. Spock's going to be like, ee.
All right. I'm writing that down. One Star Trek reference already.
Yeah. No, it doesn't
You're
count.
only allowed like one per show, so you blew your blew your load on that. Now, Mike's a huge Star Trek fan. I'm not. I don't know much Star Trek outside of this business. Nothing against it, just wasn't my thing. So whenever Mike and one or two of our other friends will get deep into the dark web of Star Trek, I usually I'm looking out the car window at that point.
you're daydreaming, or for sure. I hear that. Yeah, I won't. It was May the 4th the other day, and so I begrudgingly, I wished all my friends who are big Star Wars fans happy May the 4th day and whatever. I like Star Wars too. Just I'm on Team Star Trek. That's my it's
yeah. I'm a Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. It's like Well, at least it's not like the Islanders to me. At least Star Wars to me is not the Islanders.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's more like a team you might even like a little bit.
Sure.
Like I can like the Denver Nuggets and be a Knicks fan, a woeful Knicks fan.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
They'll turn around. But I will make one more Star Trek reference indirectly, but no, check this out. So this relates to it. So
This is a bad road we're already starting on.
no, so I went running before this because you got.
By the way, this is what we're talking about tonight, so we should just let people know that.
Yeah, no, last one. So I went running earlier, and it's I purposely I haven't had any water. I haven't eaten in like hours because I know if I drank a lot of water, then like the needs of my prostate are going to outweigh the needs of the many, and I would have.
You'll be having the drizzling piss.
Yeah, I would have definitely been running in and out. So I haven't really drank. I'm going full Mahatma Gandhi here, dude. Like this is a total fast for me. So
which is not the drizzling shits, I should point out, which Mike refers to as a certain era in music. But we'll get into that.
We're going to talk about a couple of seconds, actually. So I think no more prostate, Vulcan, needs of many, something like that references.
It might be another name for the podcast, Vulcan Prostate.
Vulcan Prostate. I bet they got big.
Or maybe a band name.
Yeah, probably get sued by Paramount or whoever owns it. But in any event. All right, so yeah, the reason we're here is we want to talk about music and specific subjects. And, we figured Judgment Night soundtrack, we'd start with it. It's very influential, changed a lot of lives. It was kind of one of those soundtracks along with Empire Records in the 90s when everyone's like, oh, it's good memories. You bring it up in a drunken bar conversation and it's like, oh yeah, Judgment Night, man. So it's a good place to start. And yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about it. Really quick, I don't want this to turn into a Wikipedia article, but if it's cool for you, I'm going to go into a little bit of the history of the film and the like the soundtrack and the history of rap and rock and this whole misconception for about 2 minutes. Any objections?
Nope.
All right, screw it. Okay, so the film came out in October '93. It was directed by Stephen Hopkins. He did like Nightmare on Elm Street 5, Predator 2. So he was a pretty solid director until one point, which we'll get to.
Not Stephen Hawking, Stephen Hopkins.
Yeah, Stephen Hopkins, not Stephen Hawking.
I actually Google image searched earlier, and it somehow brought me to Hawking.
And Larod Stevens Howlings, former running back of the Arizona Cardinals, who won me Week of Fantasy, and I've often referred to as Larod Stephen Hawkins. Why? I'm more familiar with that name growing up. Yeah, so this dude, he did some good stuff. Since he's recovered, he did The Life and Death of Peter Sellers. He's worked on 24 Californication.
Recovered from what?
He recovered from a really terrible movie he did in the late 90s in the era of the drizzling shits, Lost in Space.
Here we go, the drizzling shits.
Yeah, anything from like...
I like how it made an appearance. We're only a few minutes in here, so...
Anything from like late 97 to probably like halfway through 99, like just everything sucked in. I call it the era of the drizzling shits. Like, I mean, Blade came out, Blade is awesome, but everything else sucked. So many bad movies there. Like that's when like the asteroid movies came out and Spawn and Lost in Space and Godzilla with Matthew Broderick. Those are some of the fucking worst movies I've ever seen, man. And like I just like I hate all those movies. So that actually tanked his Hollywood career. So he did, but back 5 years before, he put out Judgment Night. The movie had a lot of press. Emilio Estevez, who was a big star back then from the Brat Pack and the Mighty Ducks, Cuba Gooding Jr., Dennis Leary, Jeremy Piven, and even our homeboy Everlast, who we're going to talk a lot about tonight. We're all in it. It's funny going into it, and this is a theme with the album too. Who was a star going into it versus who was a star now or coming out of it. So about a month before, the soundtrack dropped in September '93, and Happy Walters was the guy. He was House of Pain and Cypress Hill's manager. He was the guy who was kind of responsible for this. Karen Rackman, she was the music producer. She was the sister of Ricky Rackman from MTV's Headbanger Ball and later WCW fame, Headbangers Ball. And so, that's about it. I know before we get into the history of rap and rock and how this misconception about, they've been so segregated and separate, which is total bullshit. A little bit, you were listening to Everlast the other day in a podcast, and he said he actually had a role in this thing. He just didn't take credit, and it's cost him millions.
Well, I believe the way you put it, just to be we're not going to fact check too much on
Sure.
this, but no, I just from remembering hearing it, he was just saying he would have been able to fly private. So that's how he put it.
Yeah. He probably did have a role. Happy Walters was he was 22, so he was younger than Everlast and probably the Cypress Hill dudes at that point. So, while he did
Yeah,
have,
no, it was kind of a revelation though, just to hear that he was, he was pretty involved in the process of kind of setting this album up. I mean, I've been a huge fan of his since the House of Pain. I didn't know his early work, which was, as he's even put, he could have been the next Vanilla Ice, um, or the first one even. He's like, if his thing had popped at the time, he was working with the Syndicate crew, Ice-T's Syndicate crew, which
oh,
was kind of more of a hard, group. But when he first came out as a solo artist, they sort of made him try to be like a pop star more, like a Vanilla Ice like rapper, image wise at least. But he said that could have been him, but that didn't pop. And then the next thing you know, he wound up with the House of Pain, which was more his style. And that's how that came to be. But they always mixed in a lot of rock element as well.
absolutely.
Actually, he said they were going to start, the House of Pain was going to start out as a band because Danny Boy, who's in House of Pain, had come from the background of like hardcore and punk, and they wanted to make it almost a band. And I'm trying to remember who he said that they had seen come out as a band. And I believe he said that they were doing Unplugged. MTV started doing Unplugged at the time,
Yeah.
and that every rapper started having a band at that point. So they were like, oh no, this is not, everybody's doing this already. This isn't going to work. So they kind of went back to drawing board, and the DJ Muggs from Cypress Hill wound up, producing a lot of, obviously the hit Jump Around and a lot of that album. So it has that, definitely that Muggs flavor to it.
Aggressive, yeah, aggressive feel because it has a lot of that rock and like punk rock or even like hardcore attitude to it and energy. It's a lot of energy in your music.
Yeah, but I think, well, yes, it definitely does. I think that comes more from probably like Everlast in the group, whereas like the Muggs production was more like sample based and like some of those like type of Celtic kind of. I think even I think producer Prince Paul, famed Tommy Boy producer, Prince Paul called it that Lucky Charm shit.
Yeah, that's pretty
At
cool.
one point, yeah. So
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, absolutely. And obviously Everlast, if he's had a great solo career in La Coca Nostra, but we'll get more into him in a little bit. Just in terms of before we start reviewing the album itself, I just for a couple of seconds wanted to talk about the history of the whole notion was the '80s were very segregated. Like Michael Jackson couldn't get on MTV originally, which is kind of you hear that now, you're like, what? But I think like rap and rock, I should say, and hip hop and soul and punk and reggae. It's all kind of comes from the same roots. It's about sticking it to the man. It's protest, blue collar. A lot of like soul and Motown that had to do with like civil rights and protest. Metal, like blue collar in the 70s in England. Punk was definitely against Thatcherism in England in the late 70s, and hip hop, of course, originating in New York with socio-political issues in the streets. So MC's talking about what's going on, you normally wouldn't hear on the news. And I think like this whole thing of like rap and rock being totally separate, I mean, that's never been the case. You could go back to blues and rock and roll coming from the blues, and even in the 70s, you had like Funkadelic and Minnie Riperton were taking rock music in their music, and Led Zeppelin was doing some funk rock. Talking Heads, of course, put some funk in your music. Blondie had a hit with Rapture. You had bands like the Bush Tetras, the Minutemen, No Means No, who are underground punk groups. They were incorporating like funk and disco and elements. And of course, the Beastie Boys, Tone Loc, and Def Jam recordings of Rick Rubin and Russell Simmons. They were all sampling rock music or, they had both rock, heavy metal, and rap artists on their label, which at the time was pretty revolutionary. So you had all this going on. And of course, Chili Peppers and Rage Against the Machine would later be huge. In mainstream America, though, the two biggest influences besides Rapture by Blondie, where, it's like girls rapping literally on mainstream radio. We had Aerosmith and Run DMC in 1986, "They Walk This Way," and then Anthrax and Public Enemy, "Bringing the Noise" in '91. And
yes, that's right.
Yeah.
You forget about that one. Gets kind of lost in the mix sometimes, but for me anyway. But.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not as remembered, not as radio friendly because it's a heavier track. And
right. No, but it definitely stood out though. Yeah.
Yeah, and they toured together, and Anthrax doing "I'm the Man," like kind of a tribute to rap. They were really into rap. So, but the last thing I'll say about this, so rap and rock are always kind of on a trajectory. Whether it's the same principles of protest and sticking it to the man and improving situations and telling stories about that you normally wouldn't hear on the news or in suburban life or whatever it is. And by the time the soundtrack they started working on it, they were already 2 Lollapaloozas deep. So, you had the first one, and bands like Body Count, Rollins, Chili Peppers, Booyah Tribe, who were on the soundtrack. And then you also bands like 24/7 Spies and Infectious Groove, Suicidal Tendencies, and they were doing their thing. But never before have you had like this merger, this kind of crossover of hip hop and rock artists together at once. It was kind of like you remember like the Laugh Olympics in Hanna-Barbera when like Yogi Bear and the Jetsons and Jibber Jabber or whatever would all get together and take on the bad guys.
I don't, but I see where you're going.
Yeah, it was like the Laugh Olympics, and you could Google. It was one of those Hanna-Barbera cartoons in the '70s or whatever it was. But yeah, so it was kind of like that. So yeah, basically this happened. The roots of this from 1992, as is referenced in one of the tracks. And before we get into it, I'm just curious. My first question for you is, what was it the first time you heard about this? How did you get into it? And what were your initial thoughts? And just overall talk about it a little bit.
Well, okay. Just to be totally upfront, all right, because I'm looking at the track list right now. The very first time I listened to this entire album was this afternoon.
Okay.
You had actually, I feel like, did you own it?
Yeah, it's one of those things. I kind of found my way. I mean, growing up, and I'll get into it in a second. You go, and I'll go on a whole diatribe and kill the audience.
No, I knew the movie actually before. I knew the soundtrack existed. Like I always knew of it. It was it was like a big deal at the time for sure.
Yep.
That these acts. I just like no one in the house had it. I had a couple of older siblings. I had like albums or music from pretty much most of the artists on here already. Definitely House of Pain, De La Soul, Run DMC, Onyx, Slayer, Ice-T. Definitely Faith No More. That Faith No More was a huge influence for me. So a lot of them already just on other albums. So, but I used to hang out with some older kids, so they would get like movies. For instance, I think this movie was rated R probably. So I would get to watch some old, stuff I maybe shouldn't have been watching at the time by the standards. But so I saw the movie first, and I loved House of Pain and Everlast. So he's in the movie too. Mm-hmm. So I knew the aura of the whole project. And then it wasn't until college, I saw it probably like whatever it originally came out. It was probably, when did the movie come out? 93?
October
93. I was 11. So I probably saw the movie when I was like 11 or 12.
Sure.
And then I didn't hear, like, I probably heard Just Another Victim, which is the first song, but the first time I really, really sat down and listened to any of it was Fallen. I heard it in college, and I was like, what is this? And I was like, De La Soul and Teenage Fanclub. I still don't really know who Teenage Fanclub is, but I was a big time into De La Soul at the time. I still love De La Soul. And I was like, dude, what is this song? This is such an interesting song. And I actually, from listening to the full album today, I find it's the best song on the album. But that's a great track. And that's how I really kind of got to know about it. And And then I saw House of Pain do like a reunion show a few years back, and they played Just Another Victim, and I remembered having heard it. So that's how I was familiar with it. And then of course you were talking about it a lot. We'd reference it and stuff.
Yeah, I think I remember the movie. I like the movie. I think it's kind of an underrated movie. It's not a great, but
It's got like a cult classic type of deal going.
yeah, a lot of it's a fun period piece. But I remember those tracks like some
The Dennis Leary in it too. Just sorry, not to cut you off.
Yeah.
Dennis Leary was kind of at his height of, that shtick that he had in the 90s.
Yeah.
And he still has a bit, but he was like really, he kind of had the MTV generation by the balls at that point.
Yeah. Funny thing about Dennis Leary is, he goes from making an album called No Cure for Cancer to being on Lust Garden Foundation commercials for MSG trying to find a cure for cancer. So how about them apples? Life coming full circle. I mean, shout out to Dennis Leary for doing, a lot of good work with the Lust Garden Foundation. That's, awesome. I mean, it's cool. It was a gimmick, obviously, and him in real life is very different than his comedian gimmick. So shout out to him for doing that and being versatile enough to be in a, Rescue Me. But we could have a Dennis Leary episode at some point. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, Dennis Leary was a bit, the way they promote this was all over MTV, and that's so unfamiliar with it, just seeing the movie and a lot of the videos on Headbangers Ball. The first time I remember a couple of the videos were on Beavis and Butthead, like the Onyx and Biohazard. The first time I really heard the soundtrack in full was at one of our friends' houses. He was playing me the Slayer drum beat, which I'll actually talk a little bit about later. And then I listened to it in college later on when it just kind of found its way to me. I didn't say that out loud, but it found its way to me.
I didn't actually hear what you said. So
yeah,
now you have to say it.
Oh, no, I was going to say Napster back in those days.
Oh.
But I do own the soundtrack now, so if, the feds want to come and bug me, I could be like, no, here's the freaking official. Tim's background, I have. So I own it, and, that's it.
Let's talk about your background for a second. What's going on?
My background, yeah, my iOS isn't up to date, or OS or whatever it's called. My operating system, but
that's all right. My green screen's a little wacky because my ears are missing for a bit, and yeah,
cool. But yeah, without
and do explain for the audience that's the one person that's probably watching. Just kidding. The bandana. What do we got going on there?
Oh, I just took a shower because I went running, and so
it's your after shower here.
Okay. Yeah, no, but since we're going full 90s here with the music and the movie, I figured I'd wear my 90s Rangers jersey, and also my I basically look like I was in Suicidal Tendencies circa like 1993. There you go. Nice. So, yeah, there you go. It's even more so because a lot of LA artists in here in Cali. But
how come Suicidal didn't wind up on? Do you know why they didn't wind up on the soundtrack?
We'll talk about it in a little bit, I think, but we can. But I guess, do you want to get to the tracks now, and not to cut you off, since we're gentlemen.
No. How are we doing this? This is the first run. So.
Yeah. Oh, I do. Suicidal will make an appearance later in here, but. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit. I guess let's get right into it. Let's talk about the tracks. So starting off.
All right, we're going to go just down we'll start 1 through 11.
1 through 11, we'll do the list. We can kind of switch off of talking about them. I'll say a little intro for Helmet and House of Pain. You're going to learn a little bit about Teenage Fanclub today, as the audience will. But, so Just Another Victim, Helmet and House of Pain. So I'll just say a long time ago in a galaxy very far, far away, because it is still close to the May 4th. Helmet was a super over band. They were very successful around this time on MTV. They had a lot of hits, Jon Stewart Show, Beavis and Butthead. And House of Pain was one of the biggest rap groups in the world, and jump around and their success. And, knowing what I know now, it's interesting that House of Pain, of course, would lead it off. Happy Walters production, he managed them. So, of course, he's going to want to feature one of his guys as the leader. I think I just love this.
Also explains, by the way, why Cypress Hill wound up on 2 tracks if he was the manager for them.
Yeah, I always wondered that. And I do have a question about that. I'll ask you at the end. But in terms of this overall, like I love the instrumentation. It's like it's so crisp. It's great. John Stainer, who we all know from the Battles, and he's in like some of Mike Patton's bands. He's still doing it strong. He just did a stint on Seth Meyers' late night show as a session drummer. So he's awesome, and he brings that John Bonham like oomph to this, and the guitars sound crisp and great. And I think
What is that one sound? What is that? Bing! Yeah, what is that?
I think it's either a drum machine or they manipulated the drums and put some kind of a sample over it.
Yeah, I was trying to figure it out. I was like, this is not part of a regular drum set.
Yeah, there's a lot of sampling going on, and but in this particular track, I just love like people complain about major label productions and it sounds too overproduced, but this like you can produce hard rock and hardcore hip hop and make it sound good, and this is like textbook. This is a great opening. It just has that like energy, and it sounds crisp, and just like the instrumentation is perfect to me, and it's a great workout track.
Yes, yeah, definitely. It fits in well with at least coming from the House of Pain background, that that song, the remix for Shamrocks and Shenanigans, they had, it definitely like plays in perfect with that. Like this could have been like the B-side to that. And just from hearing Everlast talk about it, he was saying when they went into the studio, Helmet had been working on it, and they said, okay, when you guys are done, give it to us, and then we'll kind of put our styling on it too. So that's, I think, how it kind of wound up. Like it's almost like two separate tracks, but they're the same song, but it still works. Like it works for this one. Because there's definitely a break in the song where it becomes, okay, this is the House of Pain part, it's not, but it's also, like I said, it works. Cause like there's still, it sounds like, it's cohesive still.
It's natural. It's like the way it was put together. Whoever edited this, major props, because it actually sounds like a live band playing, and it sounds like a Helmet. Look like that.
Yeah,
it sounds like something it sounds like Page Hamilton, who's the main guy in Helmet, and it sounds like he's doing something like Tom Morello would do, like he's just putting guitar effects and he's like doing that thing. And John Stainer could play basically any beat. That guy's amazing. So
yeah, actually, just for like we're looking at the stuff today, I found a YouTube clip of Everlast on stage with Helmet and doing his part of the song, and it's actually a really good clip. It looks like Everlast is like a hardcore singer. So yeah. It's pretty cool. It's like I hadn't, because he does like more of the folky folk song type, blues based music now. So I hadn't really seen him look like a hardcore guy, but he does. It really does in that clip. It's worth looking up.
Yeah. I only have one. I don't want to say criticism, but it's just a personal thing, and you could laugh at me. And I hate to basically bring this song down and not, even though I think it's a 5 of 5 track. I think there's just one part like Everlast rapping in it. It's not his finest work. I will say it's cool. Like but there's one part where he starts talking about like Harvey Keitel and Jodie Foster and Taxi Driver, and I'm like, it sounds like he's like IMDb.com, Robert De Niro, Harvey Keitel, Travis. It sounds like he's reciting, and so it's like it's a little timely. And if you were to play it it's fine. It's of the time. It's just 27 years ago. So, but it is like a little.
Well, Taxi Driver was way before this even came out.
Yeah,
but that's kind of his style. Like he like, especially from the House of Pain days.
Yeah.
Like, my style was sick, like Strawberry Quick, and like he references like Marsha Brady. I mean, like that's kind of his. He even said one of his rhymes like how he just kind of like the kind of silly shit.
Oh no, for sure, and it's cool. I like.
So you're right. Yeah, I agree with you. It's like 100%. Like it's like, well, he's just like reading references, but that does go with his style at the time.
Oh yeah, it's cool. And I don't mind the Taxi. I think it's cool, but just the fact that he had to throw in like 2 actors from Taxi Driver, it just sounded a little bit like IMDb.com.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there.
Yeah. So that's all I pretty much have to say. Great opening track. Check it out. Put it on your workout.
Yeah, solid opening track for this project for sure.
So number 2, we're gonna go to the Teenage Fanclub De La Soul crossover, Fallen, I should say. And to me,
Yeah, it's with the little not hyphen. What do you call it? The apostrophe. The apostrophe. It's not falling. It's falling. Falling.
But yeah, this is like a track. This to me is like top 5 track. To me, top 3 tracks of the '90s. This is like, I love like.
This is also your favorite track on the album, I imagine. Unless you.
It's one of my favorite tracks. Maybe
it's just a great. It's a great track. Yeah. It almost like I thought it was almost when I first heard it. I hadn't known if I had heard it before. Is it some kind of a cover in a way, or? I was like, had I heard this before somewhere, or maybe I just heard this song. Probably, I believe it's been a little while since I saw Judgment Night, the movie, but I believe it's the credits song.
It's the opening.
It's the opening. Okay.
The opening. Yeah,
that's probably why I thought I had heard it before. So
yeah, the song's so good. It's like, okay, they take 1 or 2 tracks from the album, and they're gonna throw the very first scene before you meet Emilio Estevez or Cuba Gooding or any of those guys. We're gonna be here's De La Soul and Teenage Fanclub. We're gonna.
It's just such a good. I don't know anyone who does not like this song.
Top 5 tracks maybe of life. The top like if I were to think that like my friend's kid, I don't know, my friend's son, he's about 11 right now, and if you ever were to ask me about what the 90s are, I'd just be like, yo, here you go. This is the 90s.
It is funny. Obviously, I don't want to cut ahead too much, but we at the end of the track, I'll let you talk about the rest of it maybe, but I just wanted to throw in about the end of the track. You see like there's a lot of humor in it. This album is very like dark. There's even a song, won't get into it, but there's some song like Come Die With Me. Now granted, I told you this is like the first time I've heard the whole album myself was this afternoon. So there's like dark shit on here. And this song, even though it's called Fallen, it's like you can get the sense of De La Soul's sense of humor and their goofiness at the end of this track.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, bah, bah. They were actually referencing the Daisy Duke song, like, come on, baby, do them daisies. Look at them girls with the Daisy Duke song. That was a song from that era. And you can hear, I think it's like Maceo from De La Soul in the background, like, come on, baby, with them daisies. But they reference the daisies of De La Soul.
Yeah, like
the Daisy Age and all that kind
of. Yeah. Like Tribe and all those like New York and the Far Side and all those like type hippie rap, but which is
no, I mean they literally had the Daisy Age, the flowers on the first cover.
Yeah,
and that's why with De La Soul's second album, De La Soul Was Dead, it's just like a dead flower on the dead daisy on the front of it.
Yeah,
so.
That album is a whole like story in itself.
Yeah, don't want to get off topic too much, but
yeah. I will say a couple of other things about this really quickly. Yeah, I love this track. My favorite. It's pleasant. I feel like I'd love to wake up to this. If this was my alarm clock, that it would be perfect. So what's really interesting I found out is Balloon Mind State, their third album, the De La Soul's third album, came out a week after the soundtrack. Teenage.
Did it? Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, Teenage Fanclub. They're going to put out their fourth album, I believe, 13, around about a month later. And Teenage Fanclub is an interesting band. So in 1991, they put out an album that was called Bandwagon-esque, which Spin thought was better than Nirvana. They're one of those groups that they're still around doing their thing. They never made it as big in the States as they did in the UK, and they were supposed to be huge. And they've had a good career. Very good.
Where are they from?
I believe they're from Scotland. They're from the UK. I think Scotland.
So
I could be wrong about that. And
yeah.
I'm sure someone from the UK is gonna, you stupid motherfucker. But it's from they're a UK group. So.
I can't wait to see the YouTube comments.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is,
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I have one more question about this, not to, just like my only question for you is, why the hell wasn't this music video so much bigger? I mean, this is from the fucking this is a generate. They talk about generational talents in sports. This is a generational song, and this should have
It
been like
really is, yeah. I that's
incredible.
what I don't really remember it too much from the time, and except for like I said, I was like I've heard this before, but it was from seeing the movie. How was this not like a giant hit? I
I mean,
mean, in a way, you know, it was considered the soundtrack was considered a success.
huge success.
Yeah, but like, how is this not like a giant mammoth hit?
The music video is funny too. Like all the band, De La Soul and also Teenage Fan Club. They're in like detention almost or something like that in a school. It's a really funny video, and
I never saw the video. Okay.
it's cool. Check it out. It's they're in a school, and it's fun. I'm like, why wasn't this on MTV? This should have been like around the same time as if I ever lose my faith. Like this should have been.
There was all kinds of stuff on back then.
Yeah, this should have been. I don't get why this wasn't, but
And for any we do need to explain for the any younger audience that would be watching this, like, you know, it was cable TV. There was only a certain number of channels. There was no YouTube where you could just look something up and reference it immediately. So everyone kind of saw the same stuff for the most part.
yeah.
So it's a different world than we're in now. A very different world than any other time, really, because someone who grew up in the 70s didn't have that at all, or 80s, even part of the 80s, you know. So it was a very specific time in music where you had these visual elements at the ready and everyone kind of knew it. Like now, you may not have all seen the same music video. Back then, at that particular time, if MTV played it, everyone kind of saw it at the same time. So,
Absolutely. Yeah, and it made a lot of bands. I mean, we could all talk about.
yeah, and it was an interesting time, man. There was all kinds of bands, and
Yeah,
Nirvana and Smells Like Teen Spirit was kind of the, you know, the straw that broke the camel's back of the music industry in that way, and especially for MTV. And it was just like the floodgates opened of all these bands that never before would have had mainstream success. A lot of the bands that are on here, for instance, like a Cypress Hill or, Faith No More. I mean, these bands some of them were really out there in terms of conventional music by the standards of what conventional music had been till that time. And that's why, you know, Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit is so referenced. It really was a watershed moment, you know.
it's a crazy time, and all those albums. Whether it's Black Album, Nevermind, 10 by Pearl Jam, Blood Sugar Sex Magic. What else? The Low End Theory, Bad Motorfinger. All those albums came, and even Bandwagon-esque, not as much prep, but all those albums came out in a very short span from, like, let's say August to October 1991, and that's crazy. That's just like, that's an entire decade's best list right there. Like, it's crazy how all those bands just put out albums in like such a short span, and
Everything felt like a much smaller world back then.
it
Like I
did.
said, it was like everyone kind of would see it at the same time. It was the same like when albums were released. It was like a big deal. People would sometimes wait outside the record store for, like, I remember Use Your Illusion 1 and 2 for Guns N' Roses. Like, you had to pre-order this shit.
It was an event.
Yeah, it was an event, right? Whereas now, if things are dropped digitally, it's not. I'm not
Yeah,
saying it's worse or better. I mean, I do think there was an element that there was a sense of community more, in that you could reference the same things a lot easier. I do miss that. I think that's, it's never coming back probably, but
yeah.
that was a fantastic thing to grow up around.
Absolutely. And even like I was talking with some friends the other day, and then we'll get into the next track in a second, about waiting. We went to a WWF event that happened 20 years ago in Washington, D.C. And actually, yeah, it was 20 years ago. We like waited outside the MCI Center. I don't know the name of it, where the Capitals and Wizards played. We waited outside the entire night, and we quote unquote slept out. And it was just like a bonding thing for a bunch of kids in college to do. And it's like, who does that? Now you want to buy tickets to a concert, you get out of bed, you scratch your balls, get your coffee, and hit a button on your computer, and you're good to go. I am not a robot. Okay, cool. Let me go, wipe my nose or whatever it is, brush my teeth, whatever people do in their home in the morning. Yeah, so it's definitely a different time, and I think that this generation is not going to be able to experience that. Just even like remember the armbands in high school? Like you want to go see Green Day or who are Smashing Pumpkins or whoever. Everybody has to get the like the armbands with the number, and if they call number 112 and you're number 111, you are fucked, and you better hope your friend got number 110 or 108 or I'm not saying it, but you know what I mean. You can't go. I just really screwed up my math right there, which is kind of funny, but you know what I'm trying to say, basically. But moving
Yeah,
on,
no, I think the main thing was the sense of community is totally different. Yeah.
Bonding.
Yeah, absolutely. And an album like this played to that, like
Absolutely.
catered to that perfectly, because it was kind of an event in of itself, because as you said, no one had put a compilation out like this. Like compilations could be a big deal back then, especially something like this was like a new idea. And a lot of times just did reference wrestling. So I will reference for instance, the Brawl for All. They're showing these Dark Side of the Ring shows on Vice right now. And that was an idea that they came up with, where they would have the wrestlers do boxing matches. And it wound up being a pretty horrible idea. But, these are risks. You got to take a risk. So in a way, this soundtrack was probably not too much of a risk, because rap and rock had shown it was gaining some steam, but it was still a risky move to just throw these bands together. I mean, that's an interesting part of is like, how did this band wind up with this band, and like, did they choose each other? I'm interested to know, because I bet there's a story behind each track of like, were you guys in the studio together? Did you guys not did somebody not like each other? Because band personalities, I mean, look how many bands, I'm sure most of the bands on here broke up at one point. They've probably all been in fights with each other. So this is adding two bands together. And I actually heard there's a Rage Against the Machine and a Tool song, because I was listening to it this afternoon. I'm like, how is Rage Against the Machine not on here? Was it too soon? Had they not really gotten out there yet? But apparently they did a song with Tool, and neither of the bands liked it. But I bet there's a story behind every single track here. It would have been great to be a fly on the wall. Was it all done in one studio? I imagine it wasn't, because there's a Sir Mix-a-Lot song with Mudhoney, and they're both from Seattle. So I got to imagine maybe some of it was territorial, right? Like they're like, you guys are in Seattle. You guys are going to do the Seattle track. Like, you guys are in New York. I don't know. And
that's actually the third track on here that,
good segue. Good
segue. Because we have two.
We're figuring it out, folks. We got segues already.
Yeah. We have a New York connection here. Living Colour and Run DMC doing the third track on here, which is called Me, Myself, and My Microphone. I'm a huge Living Colour fan. I've always appreciated them. I think an underrated band who, everybody who's, they only have Cult of Personality. It's like, no, they've actually had a lot of hits in the States, which, people don't seem to remember. Cult of Personality, WWE wrestler CM Punk used it for his track for a while. But this is a cool thing. I think it's appropriate for Run DMC being on a soundtrack, because them and Aerosmith in '86 kind of kickstarted the whole rap and rock into mainstream. And Vernon Reid, who very accomplished musician in jazz rock, also being part of the Black Rock Coalition, which is basically for minorities who want to play in rock bands and anti-racism. And he's been involved in this in the New York music scene since the late '70s. Living Colour started in 1984. They're from Brooklyn. Run DMC's from Queens, so this makes natural sense.
And it would have been a crime to not have Run DMC on here.
Yeah,
considering how integral of rock rap act they were before all this.
Yeah. One other interesting thing I think that's really cool here is Doug Wimbish, who was the bass player for Living Colour. He joined a group in '92, so it would have probably been around this time when it was recorded, maybe a little bit after. He was originally the bass player for the Sugar Hill Gang and Fab Five Freddy and Grandmaster Flash, so he played on White Lines. That's him.
See, that's the knowledge you're not going to get from other podcasts.
That's right.
Mr. Aker goes deep.
Yeah, I just love
in
this.
the traits.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like the coach in a Major League too when he's watching the English. I love this shit. But uh, yeah. In any event, yeah. So it's and Living Colors worked. They've worked with rappers before, right? Dougie Fresh and Queen Latifah on a couple of their tracks. So overall it's cool. I like this track. I think it's very energetic. Doug Wimbish kind of drives it with his bass line. It's cool. Just I just think it's fun, very energetic. It's another good one you could put in a workout. The only thing I will say, and how you feel about this, first about overall the track, but also the one thing I could see that could be a little distracting is the like the Dr. It's like a drum. It feels like a Dr. Rhythm drum machine where they have this like clap effect going through the entire track, and it is a little distracting. And I could see personally why some people wouldn't appreciate it or wouldn't be their thing. I'm fine with it, but yeah.
I have a different take on this than I probably would have when it first came out. So it's interesting. It's good that we have those two takes because you heard it pretty much like when it came out, right?
Yeah.
I heard all of it for the most part outside of a track or two this afternoon in 2020. A lot of it does sound dated at this point to
Sure.
that time. Personally speaking, we're going to go through some of the other tracks though, but I would say I think there's like 4 like really good tracks on here, right? Good, at least good. And then some of the other ones just sound kind of dated or you know, that kind of thing to me. But yeah, I mean, this fits like this particular track. It sounds like it makes sense. It's not something to write home about for me.
Fair enough.
It's like, okay, this is Run DMC. Yeah, they're doing their thing.
Yeah. The one thing like was interesting to me was where was Corey Glover? He's the lead singer of Living Color, and
yes, that's probably my problem with this track and I found this with some of them because it's like, wait, that's exactly the problem. There's other tracks on here too where it just didn't blend as well as I would have liked. For like, if you're gonna have 2 artists on here, and that's the specific point of this album, like everybody should be involved. Not to cut ahead too much. Well, I guess we want to keep it track by track, but yeah, like I don't know, just the reference to Faith No More one.
Mr. Patton.
Yeah, like
we'll get to
like,
Mr. Patton. We'll get to Mr. Patton.
Yeah, but he's not in it too much, but he's still like a big part of the song. You know what I mean? Like you could tell that's Mike Patton. Whereas you're right, Corey Glover. Was Corey Glover?
Corey Glover, who was actually
Sorry.
he was also in Platoon with Charlie Sheen and Keith David.
Really? I did not know he was in Platoon. But yeah, no, he should be like a way bigger. I don't even think he's in the track that I remember hearing, but he should be a way bigger part of this.
He may be doing that da 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 at the. It sounds like Run DMC, and if I ever do meet Corey Glover, and he's pretty accessible around New York. If I ever do run into him, he performs a lot solo. Living Color still do. They're still around. I would definitely love to ask him about it. And
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because that was my main issue with this.
He's a super talent. He's a tremendous singer. Great voice, very versatile. Super talented guy. Actor, singer. Kind of a renaissance man. And to not have him on, they should have at least found somebody to incorporate him a little bit more. Because just it's a disservice to the track not having him on here.
Half the fun of this album is the novelty of it. That's what really still makes it stand out to this day is the novelty of never having had a compilation like this before. And if you're not going to take the novelty 100%,
yeah, you got to go all in, man, go all in.
And that's why it would have been interesting to be a fly on the wall with some of these, like with someone like, I don't want that part in, or this guy doesn't sound, because like the bands get that, and then when you're adding 2 bands together.
Yeah, I'm definitely picturing like the guy from I forget the actor's name, the main guy who played Arliss is like the or even like a Jeremy Piven. It's like the producer, like, no, you got to take that out. Or what's the woman? Kate McKinnon is her, the one who was in Ghostbusters and she's on SNL.
Saturday Night Live. Yeah.
Yeah, she was great as an asshole producer in that movie Yesterday that Danny Boyle did about the whole alternate history without the Beatles, and she was
I didn't see that one. She's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Kate McKinnon was great as like an asshole producer. So picturing her like, no, we have to take this out of like Corey Glover, like, well, tell Mr. Glover it's too bad or something. But,
I'm a cult of personality.
Yeah.
What's the guitarist's name?
Vernon Reid.
Vernon Reid. Yeah, he's the man. Like, that guy's like super talented.
Great player. Another guy who, if you're around New York, you can find him. He plays a lot of gigs, a lot of jazz at Iridium. When we're back to normal, of course. But yeah, so that's it for this track. It's a workout track for me, but I guess not for you. But hey, it's cool.
It might be. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't. It could be a workout track.
Right on.
Yeah.
Track.
But I was just like, looking at it as a perspective of wanting it to. It didn't fulfill my full expectations.
Yeah. Run DMC around this time would also be on the Beavis and Butthead Experience doing that track Bounce and Down with the King. So they were pretty busy.
That's a favorite track of mine, Down with the King.
Yeah. So moving on to track 4. So just keep it Biohazard and Onyx doing the title track, Judgment Night. My good buddy Sticky Fingers on here, who I met in the years before we would know Biohazard as the band that the guy from Oz who showed his penis used to be in, Evan Seinfeld. Biohazard was pretty big back then. Onyx is interesting.
But you have to explain that more. He was in a porno, I believe.
Oh no, that was he was originally in Oz. So I guess he changed. He left Biohazard or by the end of the 90s. He ended up.
You can't just say the guy's penis was out and not explain it.
Yeah. I've seen Evan Seinfeld's junk.
I thankfully avoided that, but
yeah. He was on Oz and he was one of the prisoners and they throw him in solitary confinement.
Okay. So there was no porno.
No, it's from Oz.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to watch Oz like fairly regularly on HBO, and so yeah, that's unfortunately so it's kind of like I'm just like, oh yeah, that. But Biohazard.
Does it change how you feel about the song, Mike?
No, it just automatically. Anytime I think of Biohazard, like by association, I'll think Evan Seinfeld's dick in Oz.
Oh man,
hey, it is what it is, bro.
Oh, God.
Well, I also think of Billy.
That's
G.
rough.
I also think of Billy G from Biohazard, who now plays in a band.
Have you seen his dick as well?
No, I've not seen Billy Grajagi's dick at all. So I'm sure if you tweeted him, he'd appreciate that. But he plays in a group of Sendog now called Power Flow. But in any event, I don't really have much to say about this. I just really like this track. It's good, but it's just intense. But it's not like remember the Hulk Hogan Macho Man promo where like the joke is they're on shrooms. They just keep like, and then the universe, and then the stratosphere, and then and then the solar system. Ooh, it's a very famous clip on YouTube you could find Hulk Hogan and Macho Man, and they just keep getting more intense each other and keep like, oh yeah, brother, what you during their whole thing. I feel like this track is the equivalent of that. It just both artists keep getting more and more intense, but they're not trying to one up each other. It's just that's who they were at the time, and that's what they're. That was part of who they were as groups, as musicians, as vibes, and it showcased the best of them. And it's a great track. It's appropriate to be the title track. And I also think of that crazy video of them being locked up in the police van with like the straight jackets on or whatever. So yeah, that's all I really have to say about this one.
Yeah, I pretty much agree wholeheartedly with everything you said. Yeah, I mean, it definitely fits in the Onyx canon of intensity. I don't know like Biohazard as much, but yeah, it definitely fits right in with all their work. It's not my favorite track of theirs ever, but yeah, it fits right in, man, and it works for this compilation, especially at the time. It does sound a little like I was thinking when I was listening this afternoon, I'm like. And again, this kind of goes back to what a different time that was. Like, there's no way, like, this band, rap group Onyx would get like huge, right? Like if they came out now, it's just like there's too much yelling and screaming for like, you know what, for this like time. It worked perfect then. Slam was the huge hit that they had, and it's not. I'm just saying. I'm not speaking so much from how my take on it, because I love the energy, but I just think like it'd be tough for a band like that to get out nowadays.
Do you think that's why Onyx wasn't the biggest, or one of the biggest groups in it? Because they were just so hot around like 93, even like 94, 95, and they throw your guns in the air. They were really, they were white hot, as the saying goes, that they were everywhere. And it just seems like they lost momentum after that. Was it because, I don't want to say one note, was it just because they were too intense and they didn't have different kind of variances to their flow and style? And just after,
Yeah, I mean, that's what I would say, and I love those guys, man. I mean, I don't know them personally, but like, that I love that whole vibe they came out with, the intensity. But it is a bit of a one-trick pony, but it's and they probably got pigeonholed into that. I haven't like sat and like listened to like all their catalog, so, but I don't see them getting much far away from like is a lot of yelling and screaming, for like a whole album. Like at a certain point, I don't know. Like I can't say because like I said, I haven't heard every album, but I got to imagine like 95% of their albums is like throw your guns in the air, and that's a great track. But yeah, you do need to like, oh shit, man, I need to chill for a second. It's like, dude, all right, coach, put someone in for me for a minute. It's like, dude, it's so intense. Yeah, that would be a lot to listen to like constantly. So I'm not trying to knock them because I do respect them a lot, but because that's great workout music is that intensity. But as a full like, there's different moods you have. Right?
I want to hear like a Fredo Star bossa nova.
Yeah, exactly. Like a Sticky Fingers serenade.
Yeah.
They're probably like, I'm sure they must have tried to mix things up at some point. It's just we haven't like dug deep enough into their catalog. There's got to be some nuance in there because nobody could just keep that like like all day, every day, 24/7, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if someone could do it, I think Sticky Fingers and Onyx and Fredo Star and all them, they could do it. Especially Sticky Fingers, You better give me the microphone before I bust in my pants.
Yeah. 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 I really want to watch I want to watch the Blade TV series where he started. Now I'm kind of curious just to see if he was that energetic the entire time or.
Yeah.
But
that would be interesting to see. Yeah. I would just like the Sticky Fingers. Like, does he come home from a like a tour and just like chill because he got everything out during the tour, right?
He was pretty mellow when I saw Onyx last November. And you go to my Instagram at Method Mike A on Instagram. Shout out, plug, and then you can see a picture of Sticky. He was pretty nice and chill after the show. So yeah, I think like we're talking about the gimmicks and wrestling, and a lot of musicians, comedians, and actors have gimmicks, and so I think it's part of his gimmick.
Yeah. Well, it worked for them, I mean, we're still talking about them in 2020, and you just saw them a few months ago. I wish I could have gotten to that.
Yeah, they're still touring the world, man. They're still doing their thing. So
that's good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
You need that. You need that intensity, though. As much as we're bitching about you can't do it all the time. It's welcome when you haven't had it for a while.
Yeah. So let's move on to now. I'm going to start. Now comes me starting some controversy. Slayer and Ice-T.
Uh-oh.
So the name of this. So this was a medley actually. It's called Disorder. It's a medley of 3 exploited tracks: War, UK-82, and Disorder. I'm not familiar with exploited, so I'm sure one of our punk buddies would be able to give us a history of them, and you can do the Wikipedia. This was the first track I heard off this album. One of our friends Mike, shout out to Mike Lesnick. He introduced me back in the day. He's like, you got to hear this drum beat. And I finally, for the first time this week when I heard it, just to kind of refresh my memory of all this, I actually kind of liked it. But I don't know, like, this isn't in my top 5. I feel like this is a little too disorganized. And it all comes back to expectations. And, like, we're from New York, you got these sports fans who are all, like, they want to win every single year. But it's like, being a sports fan, you have to look at it. What are your expectations? What are the personnel you have? What are you going to do? Do you think you can make the playoffs? You're not going to win the championship every single year. It doesn't work that way. But with the personnel that your team has you root for, are the playoffs realistic? Can you win a round? Are you happy just to see progress because you're rebuilding? With this particular track and kind of relating it to sports in a strange way, the expectations are, you have Ice-T, who's done a body count thing, so he's very familiar with this kind of style. And you have Slayer, who have the big four, Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, Anthrax. They're the heaviest, hardest, most intense of these bands. So I expected like a 5 to perfection. And what we got was, I don't know, it just feels a little disjointed. I don't know. It doesn't flow well to me. There are good parts to it. I love the drummer, whoever is drumming. I love the polyrhythm and the tribal feel to it. And I don't know if it's Lombardo or Boss Path.
Might have been, it could have been, yeah. I think Beatmaster V was the body count drummer. But then again, it doesn't look like body count was a part of this track. It was just Ice-T.
Yeah,
this is just Slayer and Ice-T.
Yeah, and they utilized Ice-T and Tom Araya pretty well throughout the track. It just like, the flow to me isn't there. And, in terms of just getting into it and being able to go on a journey with it, it feels just kind of a little bit disorganized. And, because Slayer, this is Slayer at their peak. I don't know. We'll also just throw in kind of little, clips or little interesting fact. I mentioned a drummer. I don't know if this is when they had issues with Dave Lombardo. If this is when he left the tour, and maybe it was when Bob, or it could have been before or during this is happening. So maybe there was some tension there, and that's why this track wasn't as good as it could have been, in my opinion. But I expected perfection, and what we got something was decent, in my opinion. And I like it. If it comes on, I'm gonna be like, cool. But this is never gonna be something where I gravitate towards. I'm never gonna be like, oh, I want to hear the Slayer Ice-T melody from Judgment Night. It's like, all right, if it's on, cool, pass.
Yeah, I did not know it was a medley from Exploited.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. I will say I'm a huge Body Count fan.
Yeah.
I really like the brand new album Carnivore. I've only heard once or twice, and there was definitely a couple of strong tracks, but the one that came out a couple years ago, maybe 3 years ago, called Bloodlust, that's a good album. Like, that's the best work they've done since the original Body Count album came out. So you could have just thrown in a Body Count song here on this part, and it would have still like worked out, perfect for the album. But yeah, Body Count is the perfect blend. I mean, Ice-T isn't even really rapping with Body Count so much though, but
yeah,
he's not really singing either. So it's like, he's in his like kicking game type of mode, which plays into his rap persona. So for me, it does, Body Count has, is that kind of rap rock deal. I know Slayer was a huge part of why Ice-T started Body Count. They even do, on Bloodlust, they cover Rain and Blood. And he explains before the song starts how they had certain influences, suicidal tendencies was a huge one. And then they say, but one of my favorite groups of all time is and always will be Slayer. And then they go into like Rain and Blood. So it makes perfect sense for them to both be on the track. And I will say one thing. It didn't like overall stand out to me as this great track either, but it was nice. It felt like they were working together. They did on the track, unlike the Living Color Run DMC one that felt more disjointed with the groups in terms of, here, Corey Glover.
Got it. Yeah. So I guess we can move on to Faith No More and Booyah Tribe, and they did a track called Another Body Murdered. Yeah, this is I like this one a lot because so Booyah Tribe was they're still around. They are a Samoan rap group from LA, you know, pretty interesting for the time. They were on Lollapalooza '92, so maybe they probably recorded this coming off of that or during it. And yeah, to me it's really funny that they're on here because they're pretty good friends with the Chili Peppers, and there's actually clips you can find on YouTube of the Chili Peppers doing "Give It Away" in Lollapalooza '92, and the Booyah Tribe picking up Flea and like putting him on, you know, one of the rappers putting them on his shoulders and Flea's playing. And given, you know, Chili Peppers and Faith No More have kind of had a very interesting history. There's been a lot of tension. So it's kind of funny that they both work together here, but I mean, it's neither here nor there. It's I like this as a track because this really is Faith No More at their peak of their metal meeting, kind of like you know, horror music in a way.
Was this Jim Martin on guitar?
Jim Martin was absolutely. Jim Martin was in Faith No More until 1993, and they changed a lot after. A lot of that.
Oh, so this was probably one of the last. Was this Angel Dust came out before this? Do you know?
Yeah, I think Angel Dust was earlier in the year. I think
because I know they were like pretty soon after that Martin left.
Yeah, they did Angel Dust. They did this, and then they did the songs "Making Love to" EP, aka the one with the two rhinoceroses having sex on the cover. The silhouette of it
sounds like Faith No More.
Yeah, they covered Dead Kennedys, "Let's Just the Landlord," and "Easy" by Lionel Richie, and everything like that. Yeah,
right. I've heard the Easy cover. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was the last thing Jim Martin did. But so this is like perfect because Jim Martin, once he left, the metal influence left Faith No More, or a lot of the metal influence left them, I should say. You know, because that was, he wanted to go more rock and they wanted to go more experimental. The other guys are more different things. You know, Roddy Bottom with Imperial Teen, but the other guys play in other projects. But this is of that sound, that like real thing, Angel Dust. This is kind of the accumulation of it, and I love also it's a fun track because well, Mike Patton's the ultimate pro. You know, he's all about servicing song and about his role, and so he doesn't take center stage.
I 100% agree with that. By the way, yeah.
No,
for this song, it works great.
Yeah, there's no ego. He just does that really creepy, like oh, chanting, which adds to just the creepiness and like kind of horror movie or. Because this movie is about a bunch of guys, you know, a bunch of like suburban guys or whatever getting chased by in an urban environment. And so it adds to that kind of like claustrophobic or kind of a, you know, somebody stalking you type feel. And so I like Patton on here. Faith No More sounds great. And the Booyah Tribe sound good. I don't remember their rapping too much. Like there are no lines that stand out, but I think the overall style works with this.
Yeah, I totally didn't mean to cut you off, but the Patton thing is spot on. And he feels like, even though he doesn't really have lyrics, from what I recall, his presence is all over this, and you can even hear like the sound effects, the vocal effects he's using. He's done a number of soundtracks now, and I saw some video of him where he brought people to this studio that he has, where he's made all his own instruments with these crazy, the wackiest things you could imagine, like some old Fisher Price record player type stuff, you know? So that's, you could tell. I mean, you guys, you know more about Mr. Bungle than I do, but I know he did a lot of that kind of stuff with that group. So yeah, he plays perfect with this. I loved Faith No More, especially at this time with the the Real Thing is one of my favorite albums of all time.
Great album.
Angel Dust is great too. So I guess I really do love that Jim Martin era. I know there was some conflict within the band, but sometimes that conflict is what makes great music. And so this is one of my favorite tracks on the album. I think it's a great blend. I will say again, a lot of these are, most of this is dated. I'd say Fallen is the one track that is like you could play anytime, anywhere. But that's not to say that I don't like. Obviously, I like some of the other stuff, and this is one of the songs that I do. I will say the rapping. I don't know the Booyah Tribe much at all. I tried to look them up. It looked like there was like 8 members. I was like, all right, I can't tell who's who here. But the rapping style was like, and I don't want to say, because I don't know if they were around before him or not, but it's like, it sounds like Chuck D to a T, like from Public Enemy. So I'm like, did they just totally jack his style, or did Chuck D jack their style? But it's like, like government, da, 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 like you just like the cadence and the
Yeah.
authority of the delivery. It's spot on Chuck D. So like, if you told me this was Faith No More and Public Enemy, I would have been like, it would have made more sense. Like I would have liked it even more, because I feel like that's what I associate that sound with, is Public Enemy. So now when I hear it's a different group, I'm like, wait, are they just totally ripping off Chuck D? Which, in rap is like, or any music really, is a big deal of, that's my style, man. You're jacking my style. Actually referencing the Chili Peppers and Faith No More conflict you brought up, that was kind of the whole conflict with them. They were saying, I believe, that the Chili Peppers were saying that Mike Patton was jacking the style, of Anthony Kiedis in his delivery. So interesting that came up on a Faith No More song, but
Yeah.
totally something different. It sounds like Chuck D to me, does it not?
It does. They were probably influenced. I think they were pretty young when they were in early 20s. They were a bunch of kids from LA. So they probably, and Public Enemy was already about, I think, like this point, like 7 or 8 years deep.
Yeah, I mean, it's so obvious. It's just.
Yeah, so they were probably very influenced by that. Like, I don't say the golden era, but like phase two, like the second wave of hip hop, after the original. We talked about, like Grandmaster Flash and Sugar Hill Gang and all that, kind of the second, like the public, like the Def Jam era, like the Public Enemies and the Run DMCs and the LL Cool J's, Tone Locks. So
yeah, so that is the one thing that bothers me about this track, but otherwise, I actually like it a bunch. It's a good track.
Right on. So now we can move on to a track just that honestly don't really have much to say about, Cypress Hill and Sonic Youth. This to me is just like the weakest track on the album. Like I honestly, like I don't have any interest in hearing it. It's a shame. It's a shame because Sonic Youth is awesome, and they did Cool Thing a couple of years earlier with Chuck D, actually, I believe it was, or maybe was it? I think Chuck D was on that. But the Cool Thing, Chuck.
KRS-One was on an REM album.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that was around this time or not. KRS-One would have made sense to be on this album too. I'm surprised because he's done a couple of like different. He threw like in the '90s. He threw like a track on a couple of albums where he was like doing a rock thing.
Yeah. Back to this, like I just feel this is shtick. Like Cypress Hill, we all know one of their big things is marijuana, but it's just it's total shtick. It's like we love marijuana.
That was my problem with this. It's like it's the most generic, like.
It's like somebody, and there's this whole joke about people in, like certain stay-at-home parents trying to be screenwriters and writing dialogue for like, different situations. It feels like if somebody were writing dialogue for a Cypress Hill track, it would be. It's very generic. It's boring. And Sonic Youth is a cool band. They're very diverse. I mean, they do some hip hop stuff at times. I mean, they had a fucking Madonna cover band of Mike Watt called Chicone Youth, which is just like them doing feedback, doing Madonna tracks. So, and Bull and a Heather, which come out a couple of years later, that has some like hip hop elements to it. So Sonic Youth could have done a lot of cool stuff, but even like their track is very it's not very Sonic, no pun intended. Like Thurston Moore and Lee Ronaldo just doing some like with the feedback and the treatment of it. Just I don't know, it seems very thrown together and weak to me. And maybe it's because of the time. Maybe Cypress Hill, maybe the reason they were on there 2 times is because they were filling it for somebody, or maybe just because Sonic Youth is from New York and Cypress Hill is from LA. Maybe they were only in the studio for a couple of hours together. Who knows? But just it doesn't work to me. And this is the weakest track on the album. And when we talk about fantasy booking later on, if this is the first thing that this instantly is coming off. I'm like, nope, like don't like take this is the first track I'm taking off and putting something else on.
I agree. This could have been off the album. It's I mean, really Cypress Hill phoning it in there with the freaking Mary Jane. It's like, all right. I mean, I feel like I haven't like heard all their albums, but dude, it's like, all right, we don't need to have the same generic. We know you like to smoke weed, but it's like I feel like every one of their albums probably has a track or two like this where maybe it's from smoking too much weed that you wind up writing a track about. I don't know. And God bless them for doing it. You know, they're having fun, they're doing their thing, but it's not really like a fun listen. It's just it's boring. And
Yeah,
yeah, you would have expected more from Sonic Youth. Um, eh, yeah, they could have done so much cooler stuff, man. Like, there's a song called Illusions that like Cypress Hill did. It's actually the remix of that. That's a sick song. Like, they can go like really cool and dark. They have a number of great songs that have nothing to do with weed.
yeah,
You know, How I
absolutely.
Could Just Kill a Man.
That's legendary.
Ain't Going Out Like That. I
Mhm.
mean, even Insane in the Membrane. You know, it's like they have a great, you know, catalog of, you know, I would love to see them in concert, but like, yeah, this is
Oh,
just like generic, phone it in. Um, yeah, it's definitely a disappointment.
yeah. I have a funny concert story with them. I'll share, and then we could move. It's Cypress. They came to my college, and one of my friends, he's now a doctor in North Carolina, Dr. Young Choi. It was the only time in a concert I ever saw a person tear ACL. There was a mock
Oh,
because this is when they were doing like the rap rock thing or whatever, and so they were doing a Yellow from Downset was their guitarist back then, so they were doing that, and like they had a mosh pit going for one of their hardcore tracks, and poor Young was in the middle of it and tore his ACL, and I mean, you know, he got through the rest of the concert, but he was out. He missed the entire year of Ultimate Frisbee. Like he was on a team and shit, and it sucked. So it's the only
what a
time, like,
travesty.
yeah, it's like, you know, out for the season due to a Cypress Hill concert. That's definitely one of the
No.
yeah. It's almost as weird as the time you know, I'm wearing a Rangers jersey. The coach got hit. Tom Rennie back in the day got hit by a stick, and he like had to leave the game. And they had the injury report: Tom Rennie out with concussion because like some dude's stick hit him. We're like, this is just goofy. This is
Yeah.
just yeah. So that's my Cypress Hill. But they were fun. So now moving to a Seattle track, a chipper. I like this one. Mudhoney and Sir Mix-a-Lot. This chipper is energetic. It kind of the De La Soul track with a Teenage Fanclub is very upbeat. There's a lot of darkness with you know, hardcore, real serious content about, you know, death and murder and everything like that. Now you get a more chipper track. Sir Mix-a-Lot with Mudhoney. Doing Freak Mama. Mix-a-Lot kind of is doing a little bit of his like hedonistic thing here, but he gets a bad rep, man. He had some more hits besides Baby Got Back. Everyone just knows. I mean, that's his ultimate hit. Everybody knows him. That's what pays the bills now. But you know, he's done some other cool stuff. This track from the Beavis and Butthead Experience I like a lot. And you know, cool guy from Seattle. And I really want to hear that album he did with the presidents of the United States of America called
Yeah,
Subject.
yeah,
I've
I've
got to get.
heard about that one. I remember him talking about it in an interview, and I enjoyed the Presidency of the United States of America. You got to say the whole thing because that's how they did it. They were a fun band, and yeah, that would have been an interesting. They never came out.
Never was released for various reasons. I don't know why. But so Mix-a-Lot, I guess, being from, look, Seattle's a huge rock. You know, Jimi Hendrix from Seattle, so Seattle's always had a big thing about rock. Heart was from Vancouver, but they made their way to in America through Seattle. They crossed the border and play gigs there. So Seattle's always been rock. You know, and it's cool. Mix-a-Lot got Mudhoney, who's like one of the Sub Pop original. You know, Sub Pop, for all those who don't know, is the original label that Nirvana was on, one of the more established indie labels in the country of all time. They still have a hub in the Seattle airport, as far as I know, a little store there, so you can go buy Sub Pop releases. Pretty freaking cool. And yeah, Mudhoney's still around. They've had a very solid, consistent career at the grassroots. I like the way they play on this. It's very chipper, and I just like their tone. It's like especially drums and the bass are thick, and the guitars doing all these like positive, like honestly like silly, but just it definitely it changed the mood, and it puts you in a good mood after you hear those like, you know, serious stuff. And Mix-a-Lot's rap is kind of, it's fun. You know, Mix-a-Lot isn't, you know, he's not Jay-Z, he's not Common, he's not one of these thought-provoking MCs who's going to, you know, make you think about what we talked about earlier, uh, 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 injustice and what's going on in the United States right now. You know, he's more fun for party type stuff, but and it's fun, and he did a good job in this.
Yeah, it's definitely a good change of pace from a lot of the dark stuff. I would say, yeah, it's a fun, like, similar to there are some similar. There's a line in "Baby Got Back" that he actually uses in this song, though, and then I was like, "Oh, come on!" I can't remember what it was, but it's definitely some. You could tell it's, he has that style, almost like we were talking about with the Onyx thing. Like, I kind of wish it was a little bit more different than that style. Is he like playing like this all the time? Again, this is a compilation album, so we're not working off of just one artist. But it was almost too much for me. Because he literally said one of the same lines, so I remember laughing to myself this afternoon. So, but it's fun, pretty much same.
Right on. 3 more to go. We'll do this is another Del the Funky Homo Sapien and Dinosaur Jr. doing Missing Link. So back to the bizarre world of 1993. Dinosaur Jr. was a mainstream band. They had a lot of success.
Right. This would not happen nowadays.
No way. Dinosaur had 3 albums. They were another one of those. They were on SST actually, another big indie label, and they were big in college rock or underground in the 80s as a trio, kind of like a noise rock meets stoner rock meets punk rock trio. It's funny, like they got big when Lou Barlow, who was their bass player and co-songwriter and singer, he left, and they got Mike Johnston, and then they had this commercial success for about 3 albums, 91, 93, and 94. So they were all over MTV around this time. I mean, you may that video of "I Feel Your Pain," or I think it is the name of it, the one where they're golfing around New York City. That's a pretty memorable video from the 120 minutes Alternative Nation era. So they were pretty big, and this is at their peak.
Those were shows on MTV for anyone who doesn't know.
Yeah, shows that would show like alternative music and lesser known artists who sometimes would get big. Pretty much everybody started out there. Like, we mentioned like the Chili Peppers and 9 Inch Nails is another, like you'd find their videos there first and then they'd eventually get to mainstream. It was kind of a work. Or English bands like Love and the Rockets, who were never quite on mainstream MTV, but would have their videos shown there. And then, Fiona Apple just released a new, that's where she got her start, her videos shown Sundays at midnight. A lot of hosts. But back to this, Dinosaur Jr. was a huge band back then. This is their commercial peak. And Del, it's funny, he was kind of an underground sensation. He had, I think, 2 albums out at this point. His first album,
he's Ice Cube's cousin, right?
Ice Cube's cousin. Yep. Yeah. Ice Cube even guested on his "If I Wish My Brother George Was Here," his first album, which was kind of an underground cult hit. There have been tracks in it in in various movies. Like a famous scene is Dr. Bombay is the track. This in the movie Beer
Mr. Bobalina, Mr. Bob Dobalina.
Mr. Dobalina, but Dr. Bombay, the song where Jay Chandrasekhar's character in Beer Fest, like he's back in the game and he gets drunk and he's gonna do the coin, but the quarters or whatever it's called, and they play that. So Del, he kind of had his fan base. I mean, it's funny, years later, this would all prep him for what was going to happen. You're about 7 years later, actually, yes, 8 years later, 2000, Clint Eastwood and Gorillaz, and he kind of became this mainstream sensation for a little bit. But he was definitely in his underground, his formative years here, and I like this track. Del's definitely stays within his style, his quirky style and his flow. It's fun. I love him. He references Kitty Pryde. I'm an X-Men dork, so that's cool. And Dinosaur Jr., this is perfect because it's them. This shows Jay Mascis as an awesome guitar player. He's one of the heroes of the whole alternative movement, and just his style kind of combining like punk and Black Sabbath and Hendrix and all that stuff like that. There's actually a version he does, Maggot Brain, the Funkadelic track with on Mike Watt's album, and great like a 12-minute guitar solo basically.
Yeah, I forgot about the whole not that I forgot, but just like I wasn't thinking about the Gorillaz aspect of this. That's a really good point, that he wound up basically becoming huge for similar, Del the Funky Homo Sapien, becoming huge for a crossover of kind of a rock rap. So that is interesting. That is kind of probably his first foray into it. I don't know. I know I've tried to listen to Dinosaur Jr. here and there, and I know a bunch of people are into him. I haven't been able to get into them. Maybe I just haven't been hearing the right stuff. I know like Rollins is a giant Dinosaur Jr. fan.
Yeah.
I just the couple of times I went to listen, nothing really stood out to me. But you know, this is definitely a cool one for this album. And I couldn't help but again, my ear is hearing it in 2020. So when I was hearing Del, and I'm used to hearing him, like I love the Deltron 3030, which is an album he did with Dan the Automator. I mean, that's a classic. But there's an album that Eminem did where he notoriously started doing all these like wild accents. Because Eminem was trying to change his flow around a lot. You know, just he was trying to be multifaceted. And in one of his albums a few years back, he started doing all these wild accents during his raps. And some of those sound similar to some of Del's rhymes on this particular track, which is, I think it's because Del was still young and starting out. Maybe his voice was not the same pitch as it was in later stuff that I heard from him. But
Sure.
that just kind of cracked me up. That it was like, it just made me think of Eminem trying to do these like wild ass accents. So, but yeah, no, it definitely fits with the album. And you know, I don't know too much about Dinosaur Jr., so I don't know how involved they were with the track, like the singer and everything. But
yeah. We'll talk more about Dinosaur offline, as they say. You know, one of my favorite. We'll take this offline.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll add it to the extras, even though we're already an hour and a half in.
Yeah. So yeah, we have 2 more to go. We'll try to make it. So Therapy and Fatal. Therapy. I think they're a band from the UK, I believe Ireland. They had a couple of they had a couple of minutes of fame, be like a Headbangers Ball type band, which, you know, for all you kids out there, 120 minutes and Alternative Nation. 120 minutes was Sunday nights. Alternative Nation was weeknights late. Headbangers Ball was Saturday nights, and that was more like metal and hard rock music. So Therapy was on there for a little bit in the early 90s. I don't know much about Fatal. Like he was in the Outlaws for the
Tupac group.
I believe so. I believe that was his affiliation. He's no longer with us, unfortunately. So it's interesting. I'm curious. You know, he was kind of an unknown, and this is before the Outlaws even. So like, how the hell did he get on this? But I like his performance. You know, kind of in an Onyx vein, but not as like in your face. I like his rap, and I like Therapy brings a little more of like the heavy metal aspect, where a lot of these groups are more like alternative rock, or I shouldn't say more like alternative rock, or alternative, or have, you know, alternative metal. Therapy's more like traditional heavy metal. So I think this is kind of a sleeper track for me.
All right. I did not feel the same way about this track. I was laughing first. It's good that we have some differences. But this track was awful. This was so bad.
Okay.
I just was laughing throughout most of it, because it's called Come and Die. And it's basically like come and die with me. They keep saying throughout the whole thing. And it doesn't sound like, it's like, nah, man, I'm good. Like, I don't really want to, you know, come and die with you. It's like someone who's like ready, you know, they're like, all right, it sounds like you listen to someone who's like about to commit suicide, and they're like, come join me. And it's like, nah, man, nah, I'm good. I'm good. You can jump off the bridge by yourself. So it's just like, come and die with me. I couldn't take this track seriously at all, and thought it was pretty amusing. And again, I'm sure if 11 or 12-year-old me heard this, it would have thought it was like cool and grimy, die with me, and like angsty, or I don't know. But in 2020, at 38, it's just comical for me. I feel like maybe if it was in a different, some of these tracks that were bad, I would say, like, if it was performed by someone different, like maybe it would have been, you know, like you could have kept the same lyrics and it might have had a totally different inclination to it, right? But with this, the way it was performed on this track, it was just comical.
Your cup of tea. Yeah. That's so. We'll finish it off. Last one before is this is before I talk. This is I call it the Cypress Hill Redemption Tour. Cypress Hill and Pearl Jam doing real thing. Cypress Hill is much better on this. So I love the way Pearl Jam sounded, and I don't want to say history because I don't know the guys in Pearl Jam, but like in terms of my Pearl Jam fandom, like say that 3 times. I'm not going to, but I don't know, Pearl Jam, I've like out of the Seattle bands, I kind of like like on a personal level, like just like the chord of music, I relate to them the least. I
I'll
like
agree with that. If you're talking like the 3 major ones that popped, Nirvana, Soundgarden, and
Alice in Chains.
oh yeah, okay. But Alice in Chains was a little bit later. Like I feel, well, at least when they popped, I feel like it was like a year or 2 after those.
Yeah,
Those 3 hit at like essentially the same time. Nirvana, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam. From the way I remember it, those
yeah,
3 really happened. Alice in Chains was like a year or 2 later.
yeah. Yeah, I think because like we mentioned, like those albums came out, 10 by Pearl Jam, Nevermind by Nirvana,
Yeah,
Motorfinger
I
by
think all these bands were probably around at the same time. But yeah, all those 3 albums kind of came out around the same time from
Yep,
those guys.
that window, that August to October '91 window, and they were all
Yeah.
on tour too. Like them, they all on the Blood Sugar Sex Magic tour. They were all kind of taking turns, rotating. Who was opening for
Oh, really? I didn't know
along
that.
with along with Smashing Pumpkins in the fall of '91. Like all those bands were taking turns rotating in and out. So yeah, Pearl Jam, like I don't like I love 10, I love Versus, and I love most of Vitology. And after that, like I mean, it's cool they're doing arena rock thing, and like they're a lot healthier now. They have tracks I love. Duty Evolution, great track. But they've been an MP3 band to me ever since their 4th album, and I can just kind of give or take at any given time a lot of what they do. Awesome that they're very successful and they've changed their style and made a lot of money and still making good music at times. That sounds like such a backhanded compliment, but for here, this is like raw. Like I love the way they play on this. This to me is like classic old school Pearl Jam, like just like the Jeff Ament driving and Mike McCready and Stone Gossard, Dave Edgerbees. Just this is all of them just really driving the music and sounding kind of like heavy, like the I think grunge is kind of a silly term because like it doesn't mean anything. Like it doesn't mean it. All those bands were very different. They just all happen to be from Seattle and wear the same kind of clothes or whatever. But it has that like that old school Pearl Jam sound to it, and Cypress still worked over it. I like their rapping much better than the Mary Jane stuff or whatever, the pot stuff. A little bit, Eddie Vedder could have been a little bit. They could have utilized him a little bit better, similar to Corey Glover and Eddie Vedder were in a bar having a beer together, basically recording this. Be like, man, what the fuck?
Yeah, that was again with this one that I felt was missing. Were you finished? I don't want to cut you off in your thing. We're still figuring this podcast stuff out, folks. Because
Doomcast podcast,
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, basically that's
Okay,
all
so
I
he
really.
wasn't finished, right?
That's all I have to say about it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, no, a lot of what you said. This was definitely a more redeeming track than the other one for Cypress Hill. Didn't particularly stand out for me as a song. I do find it funny. It's the name of one of the Faith No More album, which I kept thinking about, which was like, I wonder if there's some kind of reference there. What else? I would just say, I would have definitely taken out that first Cypress Hill song, and I really would have loved to hear Rage Against the Machine on this album. Like, they really could have worked out something to get them on here, because they were like, at that time in particular, like they were on fire with like their sound.
Yeah,
I mean, all their albums have some great tracks on Rage Against the Machine, I'm talking, but like they belonged on this album, man. And I guess maybe the thing with Tool didn't work out, which is kind of weird anyway, because like I think Rage Against the Machine could have had a rapper be with Zach De La Rocha. Like I could see why pairing Rage Against the Machine and Tool might have been. I mean, who knows? I feel like it could have worked, but it's a lot of instrumentation going on. It would have been nice. It would have really been nice to get a Rage Against the Machine song on this album. I feel like I would have gave it more oomph as an album for me listening in 2020. Because as it is now, I'd say there's like 4 songs that I like, and then that's for me. And I would say the 4 that really I liked, especially the first 2, the House of Pain and the Helmet, was good. Fallen is great. It's a great song.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the Faith No More, Booyah Tribe, outside of the fact that it sounds a little too much like Chuck D. Putting that aside, Faith No More. They also shine great on the Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey soundtrack, the Faith No More, as an aside. And then, I like the Ice-T and the Slayer just because of, I would say just because of, it reminded me of Body Count, but that's just me. So those are the ones for me. And the Dell one was pretty cool too. The Dell and Dinosaur Jr. one. And Onyx, yeah. Like those ones are decent. I would put those like a tier below. But
yeah, I was gonna say something really about. We'll get back to Rage Against, or just to finish off the Rage Against the Machine.
Come and die with me, Mike.
Yeah, but Rage Against the Machine and Tool. I think the reason that those bands are such good friends is there's some history. Adam Jones from Tool and Tom Morello grew up. They were childhood friends together. They went to the same middle school.
I didn't even know
together.
That. You can find the track, by the way, on YouTube. It's like very
raw,
just shitty recording, because it's probably from some like B-roll tape or something. But I tried to listen to it after this. It was hard to get through because the quality was such garbage. But like even in there, like you could hear like a part where like Zach De La Rocha starts screaming about the rebellion or something, and it's like, oh, this belonged, like if this had been like reworked properly, this would have belonged on the album.
They redeemed themselves though by being on the Crow soundtrack about a year later, Rage Against the Machine. So that's cool. That's the history. I was actually going to ask you some questions about to finish it off.
Right. Interview section.
Yeah, so this will be quick, and I could answer this. Do you have a favorite track and a least favorite track on this album? You mentioned something.
Yep, that's easy. Fallen is the best track, I said, and then Come and Die is the worst.
Got it. I'll go Fallen is my favorite and a least favorite. I just really don't like that Cypress Hill and Sonic Youth track about marriage.
That's fair, yeah. That one's bad too.
Yeah, also, so another thing, what do you think the ultimate legacy of the soundtrack is?
Definitely a watershed moment for, really bringing into the forefront the rap rock deal, as an album too. Like the Run DMC and Aerosmith was one track. The Anthrax and Public Enemy, that was one track. Even like the House of Pain, and was it Biohazard that they did the Shamrocks and Shenanigans with? I'm trying to remember. But yeah, like that was like one track on the album here and there. But this one, and this one was really as a compilation, and obviously we're still talking about it in 2020. It does stand out as like an experiment.
Yeah.
And again, it ties into, like I said, at that time, interesting part is that these bands were popular. These types of bands were like highly popular, like an Onyx and a Dinosaur Jr. and Faith No More, like bands that would not be maybe on Billboard's top 100 nowadays.
Oh yeah, fuck. And I don't mean to be one of those old men like shit. Back in my days, but back like to me, what I love about music.
Not even. I don't even look at it that way. It's just different time. I'm not trying to be like it was better or it was worse. It was just different. Because I never want to. I always try to avoid falling into that. Back in my day, blah blah blah. Because every generation say that ultimately, right? It was just different, and it was just. I do think the sense of community that we talked about
Yeah.
that I will say is missing. I think for their own benefit, like a millennial or Gen Z would benefit from like that sense of community. Like we are able to bond and discuss music because we grew up in the same era of knowing, all this, and everyone having, we could bond with lots of people from our age group on this, where I don't know, I could be wrong, but because I'm not going to pretend to be, Generation Z or millennial, maybe they're bonding on some other level, but music, I feel like very particular during this time.
Yeah, Rick Rubin once said in an interview, I think around like, I went to Slayer shows and I saw kids there and it saved their lives. And I know ultimately you could talk about it's the responsibility of it, but you have these kind of like to me really what like about music why it's so special to me is like and why I can't stand it now. Like I can't stand the mainstream music nowadays, and I'm not saying all of it's bad. And we're actually gonna talk about that in a second. Some things I have to say about that with this soundtrack, but. Back then, like I don't want to say ugly, but people like a Mick Jagger could get on TV, and he's not exactly he's a charismatic guy, but he isn't exactly the most stud muffin in terms of natural looks. And but he's an extreme example. You have these bands or these people like music was more for like the outcasts, the misfits, the people who weren't like the cookie cutter straight laced. If you didn't fit in exactly or you had some kind of issues in your life, you could always these artists you could always relate to, and it would help you just get through your day or your week or your life or whatever. Just be a source of inspiration. Like, hey, this guy beat this or that person beat that, and like I really relate to that person's music because they're a weirdo and I'm a weirdo. And I think that was cool. I think that's missing a lot from today in the mainstream music, where it's basically like it's like Homecoming. Essentially, it's like all this glimmer and all these like made up people, and it just isn't. It just isn't, and it doesn't even. I don't even mean like it has to be rock. I don't want to make it a rock rap thing because we're talking about something that combined the two. It's not even about that. Whether it's dubstep or trap or you don't really have these like freaky people anymore. With the exception of like a Takeshi 6ix9ine or whatever his name is, who are like super mainstream, who basically are telling kids like, hey, it's okay to be a weirdo. It's okay to be like a misfit and troublemaker, and and you'll get through this. And I think that's really what's missing from modern music.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, no, I agree in the sense of, you felt like you said, some of this music saved these kids' lives. Yeah, like it was for, like if you look at this lineup, it's like there's a lot of freaks and weirdos on here, which which is like, all right, hey, these guys are like me, they don't fit in, like Faith No More. Yeah, it's this crazy like group of misfits people, and that's what I really think makes, even though like saying listen to this in 2020, it sounds dated, and I have some gripes about certain tracks.
Sure.
Like I think I respect ultimately what this album was trying to do. I think is what really makes me have a love for it. Is that it tried this novel thing and it worked, especially at the time. It worked.
Oh yeah.
And and it still works to a degree, and it wound up being like hugely influential. And actually, I wound up being in two bands that very similar vibe to a lot of this stuff. So growing up, and years after this, probably 1997 through whatever it was, 2007, about 10 years there, where I was making music very similar to a lot of this. So it was a big moment, and the respect I have for trying something like this is high.
Right on. I've just a couple of things about the legacy. Yeah, it did start, it kind of took it was part of the whole 90s, and we talked about the 80s being a little bit too separated or segregated musically. The 90s was not about, the 90s was about combining everything. Look at like Lollapalooza festivals, and so it kind of took the best and it combined it in this world where, hey, everything's cool. It's cool to listen to everything, and it's cool, it's the same kind of, fundamentally it's the same, it's just intensity and energy. And So it's one of the most memorable soundtracks. It is the '90s to me. This and like the Crow soundtrack, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, Empire Records. Those were like the quintessential '90s soundtracks to me. Uh, they did try this again a couple of years later, actually. With now we're gonna get back to it's drizzling shits. The movie Spawn with Michael J. White, which was a complete disaster. Actually, well, without Spawn, Blade doesn't get made. And I love Blade, second Blade. So I made as many Blade as Star Trek references tonight. So there you go.
That down.
But no, but that Spawn movie was a complete mess. It came out in the era of the drizzling shits. It was terrible, and they tried to redo the sound, or they did the same kind of, but instead of doing rap and rock, they did like techno and rock. They had like Prodigy and I think like the Dust Brothers or people like that, and like Tom Morello and Kirk Hammett and various other. And the soundtrack did fairly well. I don't think it did as well as this soundtrack. But so they have tried it. I don't think they've ever done something like this since, a compilation of this caliber. There was a festival I attended in New York in 2005. It was actually August 20th, 2005, called Amsterdam, which was kind of cool, where they had a hip-hop artist or an R&B artist and a rock artist, and they play, the other would play, and then they come out together and do something. So you had some really interesting crossovers. You had like Wyclef Jean playing with 311 after they both played, and the Chili Peppers and Snoop Dogg playing. Well, they closed it out. Before then, you had like Garbage play with Pete, and I know Peaches really isn't. She's more like electronic or alternative, whatever it is. But she played with Garbage, so it was cool to have these kind of like themes and jam out together, and so that was a cool thing to see. And it was a fun concert. I don't think it did well financially, which is why they never tried it again. But it was a fun day, and yeah, so that's like it's still one of the most memorable soundtracks of all time, I think. And you could put this in a put this in a ring and go pound for pound with any, and you could put this with like Saturday Night Fever or Ben or The Wiz or any of those great '70s soundtracks, and then also the '90s soundtracks which I mentioned. And I guess my final question to you is, I actually wrote a lot of notes for this. Actually, I have two questions. The first being, and you mentioned it before. So if you were Happy Walters, or you were working with Happy Walters or Kate McKinnon or Jeremy Piven or any of these other fictional producers, who were some of the other artists which you would have liked to see on a soundtrack, like a version 2.0 that came out around that era or the 90s, or as replacements? Just like pick a few right now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the one that really stood out would have been Rage Against the Machine.
Sure.
It would have been cool to see, like, Rollins maybe make an appearance on here. Even I don't think he would have ever done it, but Danzig was pretty popular around this time. I don't see him ever working with a rapper, but you never know, man. You never know.
Yeah.
Probably not. He never would have done that.
It's a great pick though, and it's definitely
yeah. I mean, especially thinking about the time frame. Yeah. Soundgarden would have been cool. Soundgarden would have been pretty cool to have on here.
Yeah.
It also would have been weird. Like certain bands, it made sense to like kind of like it made sense to have Faith No More on here. Biohazard had already done, like some of these bands it kind of made sense. Sonic Youth was already experimental, even though that track is garbage.
Yeah.
But like they made sense. Whereas like Soundgarden, you never really heard they weren't much of like drum and bass. So they when I think of Soundgarden, I think of like that guitar more. Not that's not to knock the other musicians. It's just that's how that sounds to me. But they still, I feel like they could have. I would have loved to hear anybody try this. To be honest with you, it's fun. It's really fun. It's like a game to throw bands together and see what happens. So you could name a lot, especially from that time, because there was so many prominent weirdo acts. Such a rare time, and kind of went so quick in a way, but that many weird acts were big at one time.
Yeah, I have some fun. I wrote down a lot of names here, and I'm not saying they should play.
I'm sure I didn't think of rappers, but there's a ton of Wu-Tang Clan.
Yeah,
yeah,
and they were
they could have had all 8 or 9 guys. Like I always forget, is it 8 or 9? I don't know. But Old Dirty Bastard would have been like me. What our band, me and Garrett and Brian, we did a cover of "Old Dirty Bastard." We actually did. We had live instruments. And,
Yeah.
we did a Dead Prez cover, hip hop.
Yeah, that was
And
great.
we did an Old Dirty Bastard cover. It's odd, like now that I'm thinking about all that, how influenced from that era I really am. So yeah, Old Dirty Bastard. I would put him probably number one. Old Dirty Bastard and Soundgarden.
That'd be hilarious.
You throw Old Dirty Bastard with any of these people, because Old Dirty Bastard is like very underrated. Like, look, his lyrics are kind of wild. Like, actually, from having to do, we did Big Baby Jesus. I can't wait. Motherfuck that. I can't wait. But like, so I had to print out the lyric sheet, and it was like I couldn't stop laughing. Like, he was just. I think one of the lyrics was like, I need to get my $1 million by Friday. Thigh Master. Like, the next line was just Thigh Master after talking about wanting to get money. And that's, dude, he was just like this, I guess, this stream of consciousness. But he had this like singing manner, like, that Old Dirty Bastard style. Like they even said, like, he's called the Old Dirty Bastard. There's no father to his style. That was they always said that there's no father to his. There really wasn't, because unlike, for instance, the Booyah Tribe sounding like Chuck D, like you can't sound like Old Dirty Bastard, like it's just not. It's not possible. Like the guy was so quirky and with his flow and like, and so he would have been. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'll put Old Dirty Bastard on there for sure, and then Rage Against the Machine, of course. Maybe even like a Nine Inch Nails, too. They had kind of like a like some of the drums, the digital drums they had, it worked well.
Nine Inch Nails. The older I got, I love Nine Inch Nails, one of my favorite groups, and but Nine Inch Nails is just a gothic Prince, man.
Gothic
Prince.
Oh, Prince. Okay, yeah.
Like Trent Reznor, like he's totally Prince. If Prince were to wear all black and be kind of woe is me instead of like a sex freak and the purple. Yeah, but
that's pretty fair. I'll give you that one.
Yeah. I have a lot of random names. Are you ready for me to throw out some names at you right now? And for my version 2.0. So obviously I took the Chili Peppers a lot, tonight. I love the track they did of LL Cool J in '97. I think that would have been fun to be on here a couple of years earlier. That was
Chili Peppers would have been fun.
Yeah, I would love to hear. Frusciante Flea have worked together with Tricky before, and they actually covered the Wonder Woman theme track. So from the set, the Linda Carter. So that would have been fun, but something I think but that was already in private parts. And it's funny you mentioned Rollins, also another group who ended up on like the Crow soundtrack. So in some ways, like the Crow soundtrack more so than the Spawn soundtrack is the spiritual successor to this soundtrack. But in any event, so back to art. Okay, so you ready for? I'm going to go with my MCs first, and then I'm going to go with my rock groups. For the MCs, the starting lineup includes Jaruda Damager, Slick Rick, Busta Rhymes, Kool Keith, Master Ace, Rakim, and I think if version 2.0 came out in around 92, 90 or 93, 94, he wouldn't have been on here. But if it came out like 99, 2000, I'm going to throw Tech 9 on there.
Tech 9, yeah, with the flow he has is pretty cool. Wait, who was the first two guys you said? It was like, who was the first couple you said again?
Jaruda Damager, Slick Rick, Busta Rhymes.
Yes, those three definitely. Jaruda Damager is just hard hitting flow. And definitely Slick Rick would have been really interesting to have his like it's kind of like the way he like tells a story over it. And you're making me think like Tretch from Naughty by Nature would have been interesting.
Yeah.
So Guru did Jazzmatazz. Like he was that actually, See, Guru probably would not have worked. I mean, he probably could have worked on this, but like his voice worked very well for like a jazz music. Like his particular voice worked great for jazz. So he did those Jazzmatazz albums. So
he would have been fun. I could see Guru, that track that Rage, back to Rage again. that the one they did on The Crow, I forget the name of it, but it has that very jazzy, like Tim Comerford is doing that walking bass, like the jazz bass line, of course. And I think if anybody who hasn't been listening to I'm a bass player. I mean, like the amount, the subconscious bias I'm giving to the bass in this entire thing, it's like blatant. It's like it's shameful. But in any event, back to so they have that, like, and even Morell is playing that like Wes Montgomery style licks over it on The Crow. So I could have seen Guru like maybe rapping over if they expanded that intro section to that track they had on the Crow soundtrack. But that would have been fun to, fun idea, Jeru. But so rock bands, I think a lot of what you said, I said, like there's basically the first three Lollapaloozas. Like you throw out I have here Alice in Chains, Tool, Fishbone. Fishbone has worked with Busta Rhymes before, so maybe that would work. Primus would have been interesting to have on here.
That would have been amusing. I guarantee you, if Primus was on here, the song would have been like amusing in a good way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Oh my God, that would be wild. Like having somebody rap over that and have then Les Claypool like and then just someone come in like, dude, Old Dirty Bastard and Primus. That would have been the one, man. That would have been the funniest, wildest shit on the album by far. Old Dirty Bastard and Primus.
The crossover we all needed that we never got.
Yeah, you'd be like, oh.
So if there's one thing to come out of this, it's that, if I were to time travel back in time, I wouldn't do anything good for humanity, like, not knock out certain, leaders who have caused a lot of harm. I wouldn't go back and, like, some girl.
Stop people spraying the aerosol cans.
Yeah. I wouldn't go back and like meet some girl I like for the first time and basically do the whole post-apocalyptic. I know who you are. In the future, you have to trust me. The future's good. We're gonna get the COVID and Kyle Reese or some shit like that. And no, but or get a chance to do it over. No, what I do is I'd go back in time. I wouldn't go back in time and meet like a famous person or like a George Washington or or anybody. I go back in time to 1993. 390 or whenever Wu-Tang, I find O.D.B. and I find O.D.B. when he was at the McDonald's in Philadelphia when he got arrested, and I would just basically be like, stop! You have to have a crossover with Primus. You have to come with me if you want to live.
Yes, I would go back in time for that to set that track off, man.
Yeah. There's one more artist I had on here who I'd have loved to see on this album, and at that time, and I don't know if he would have done it, but just for the shock value, because he's all about the shock. And King Diamond.
Oh,
just
King Diamond and Pete Rock.
Yeah. Okay. CLC.
This is fun trying to figure out who would blend well with who.
Yeah. Yeah, but. Yeah, just imagine, or someone like Slick Rick, be like, I walked in the store and I walked in and King Diamond like, Judgement Night, doing.
Well, actually, Everlast brings up Holy Diver in his lyric. I noticed that.
Hey, right on, yeah.
Holy Diver. That's some like Dio in there.
I wonder if Dio would have been down for this back in the day.
I think certain bands would not have wanted to mess up their image. Like, like you couldn't have thrown an AC/DC on here. I don't think AC/DC, they would have been like, no, mate, it doesn't go with our, like they have such a catalog and like image they have to live up to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I almost feel like they're too big to like be in something like this, which is a shame. I feel like that probably would have been the case.
They were I think the closest they came was the last Action Hero soundtrack where not them, they had their Big Gun track, which was awesome, but then that weird track with Motorhead, Whitfield Crane, and Ice-T, they covered Born to Raise Hell.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. So
because you know what, this brings up another point.
Oh, Airheads, my bad. Sorry.
Oh, that's a fun film. But just like it brings up a good point that I want to make about these artists on here. Like, not only was the whole thing a risk, like these artists took risks, because some of them it could have been a bad look for them, if if it failed, it would have been like, oh, it's kind of like a laughing stock. So shout out to all the artists who took a risk on here, you know,
Right on.
were willing to get out of their comfort zone. Or some bands might have, you know, I'd be curious to see what bands might have turned this down.
Absolutely.
Definitely not Primus and Old Dirty Bastard.
Yeah, that's the takeaway. I do have one final question before we wrap it up. It's about, okay, so modern setting. If Judgment Night, now a movie like Judgment Night could probably never come out in 2020 for various reasons, on PC. But if they were to do a soundtrack for a movie like Judgment Night now with the same kind of theme, do you have any modern artists you think you'd love to kind of combine together? Or not even combine together, but just you think would be cool to be on a soundtrack of this caliber? And it could be anybody. And I know a little bit of an asterisk or a little bit of a disclaimer. I know like rap and rock, like rock is not as popular.
Yeah, it's so different now because there's been so much done since this album came out. You know,
Dubstep, it's more like, you know, you could probably combine dubstep and trap with rap, but that's like, so, or with more like traditional hip hop, but that's kind of cousins and related to each other. So, you know, maybe like a Grammatic or a Grizz or whatever his name is, and you know, Skrillex and rappers. But I know that
yeah,
they're,
dude, I would love to see like the experimentation go like full blown, like full bore. Like say this, you know, this in '93 stood out for its time, but we've had so much rock and rap since then.
yeah,
That it would be fantastic to just see like just go like ape shit. Like you don't have to stick to just rock and rap. You could have like a dubstep or whatever, man. You could have anything with anything, as long as the track's good. You know, as long as it sounds good. So yeah, I mean, rapper wise, you could throw in like you could just throw in like some of the names that would, you know, probably. You know, Kendrick Lamar, I think he's even done stuff like similar, like a J. Cole, you know, like those kind of guys you could throw right in here.
it's funny you mentioned J. Cole.
But I would love to see like just some really outlandish not experimentation to the point where like the album turns into some avant-garde type thing that's like unlistenable.
Well, yeah, we
but
don't.
you know, like still like structured track, which is what I'm, you know, I've had this conversation with our friend Wasan, name drop. But you know, just like that, you know, hey, you know, at the end of the day, we are pop music fans. You know, like in terms of the structure of a song. Like I love a 3 to 4 minute track, or you know, if it's more like a punk rock type, hardcore type thing, like a fucking 2 minute track will do. You know, like that's perfect. But like, and sometimes is the right time to have like an 8 minute track, but. I'm always going to revert to the 3 to 4 minute, you know, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes for a track is usually the sweet spot. And I do like a verse, chorus type thing, you know. So if you had it in that kind of format, but you could still experiment with the crazy sounds and mixing together of styles, then yeah, I'd love that. And I wouldn't want it to be the same thing that already happened. Be cool to have something fresh.
That's an interesting way, and like I didn't look at it from. I like how you did that because I looked at it more from inside the box and kind of updating the preview. I didn't look at it that
That's
way.
what I'm here for, baby.
Yeah, right. Like just like while you were speaking, like two artists I'd love to see work together, and I'm not even a Bruno Mars guy. Like he's talented, but
he's talented.
I'm not gonna listen to a Bruno.
He puts on a good Super Bowl halftime show, you know.
Yeah. But I love like Bonobo or Bonobo, you know, Simon Green from you know, one of the best trip hop. I'd love to see him and Bruno Mars. That's something like from different genre. It's not limited to rap or rock per se. But you know, Bruno Mars being one of the biggest pop stars in the world, and Bonobo or Bonobo or however you want to pronounce his name, depending on what side of the pond you're on. Him, and he's in LA now, but you know, him, you know, with his trip hop and in his jazz influences and his sampling and his bass playing and drumming. Him just like I'm curious like what they could come up with if you threw them in a room together for like a couple of hours or days and look a track like that'd be interesting and also expose a lot of people who don't know about Bonobo to you know the mainstream.
Yeah, I mean it is interesting because a lot of well hip hop especially you had a lot of featured like you would have featured if you went down the track list of an album from you know like the late mid to late 90s through like you know even current and also you've noticed that in like DJing has become so like gigantic since this album came out. And I'm talking about like world DJs, not just like hip hop DJs,
Sure.
not just like a DJ Premier or I'm talking like people like that are what's Steve Aoki. I know there's always some guy
Maybe
comes to
Guetta,
mind. Yeah.
Steve Aoki, yeah.
Yeah, like these guys make albums and it's kind of like their own version of the Judgment Night. Like it's them and then a different artist on every single track, So it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like if they did every song on Judgment Night, having a featured artist. So you do get that element already. But it would be cool to see it like this project was. Like each song is two different artists. Like I just don't know how you would do that now because I've even heard artists talking about, actually Everlast was asking his fans. He's like, "Do you guys think it's better to just release music as singles nowadays, or as even bother out with albums anymore?" He's like, "I'm not sure. I've always been an album guy, but just throwing it out there just to see what people think." And that is an interesting concept because things are sold so differently now. And I do love the album package. I just like it.
Exciting.
Yeah, it's just I love it. I don't know if we can ever get away from the album. That's tough. That's tough.
Especially
But how would that project come about nowadays? Who would finance that? Like it would almost have to be from a motion picture soundtrack. Like this was the perfect medium to do this, was a soundtrack.
yeah. Yeah, for some movie, and maybe maybe somebody will find J. Cole and force him to do it. He owns a fucking record label.
J. Cole is always good, man. He's
Yeah.
good. Yeah, he's.
I'm gonna talk about J. Cole in a couple of seconds, but yeah, I think it would be interesting. Maybe even like a Marvel movie if they were to do something, because there were so many Marvel.
They
movies.
definitely have enough money.
Yeah, if they could fund something like this and just combine a lot of different artists. And I know, like, Gwen Stefani and Moby had a hit back in it. I forget the track name, but that was from, back 20 years ago. So maybe something along those lines would be like soundtrack worthy, where you combine artists together and you have like a beefy or beyond beefy for those vegans out there type soundtrack. So we'll see. I just want to throw out some random names like for you. This is more so to make you laugh or just kind of so I did think of it in a traditional old man, like, we're going to do another rock album. Sure, but we're going to use modern people sense.
Right.
So I want to throw out some names that I'd like to have. I did combine a few, and you're probably going to be like, who? But all right. So first off, if you're doing this in 2020, I'm not a fan of his per se. I think he's too much of too much of that auto tune. I sound like I'm 20,000 leagues under the sea, but he's pretty much the biggest rapper in the world, Travis Scott. So he has to be on this. He talks them into the he talks them into the building, as they say. But him, Eminem, I'm not really as I said, I sound like I'm not an Eminem guy. I think he's a two-trick pony in terms of his content, but he's very intense, and he would be good for a harder project like this if you throw him on with like a metal band or a lesser known rock band or something like that. So he's somebody I'd like to see on here. Now I'm gonna get really crazy. Are you ready for this one? I want Nicki Minaj. I want to see her rap and her do her shtick over some like extreme metal band, some like hard, like not the local, not Nicki Minaj and the Locust. That'd be hilarious. But
Oh God,
but,
that'll be something.
Yeah, I was thinking Nicki Minaj, and there's a band on Relapse Records who just put out. I saw them live about a year ago. Inter Arma. I think they'd be an interesting matchup. Then Lizzo, because she's a flute player and just her whole attitude.
You're picking a lot of more pop like people than I would have expected.
Yeah, like pop, who also rap. I know Nicki Minaj kind of raps or sort of raps, or
but you're staying away from the underground. You're going right for the pop rap acts, or the bigger.
Yeah, I'm trying to make this very viable in 2020, and so
Gotcha.
Putting on my I want to change careers, and I'm somehow in the music industry kind of hat, which still always, it's one boy or one.
Well, I'll tell you, if you got those names, it would definitely to push some units, like, because people just on the name alone, these people's fans are gonna buy it.
Yeah. Couple. So Lizzo, I'd like to see her in Blood Ceremony. Blood Ceremony is like a Sabbath type band who, like kind of Sabbath meets Jethro Tull. I think they'd be fun. Ari Lennox, she's an R&B. She's on J. Cole's label. She's great. She's a big Chili Peppers fan, so she would be. She loves all kind of music, so she'd be great on this. I'd love to see I'm a huge Hiatus Coyote's my favorite band in the world right now, and I think them playing like a Teenage Fanclub or like a Mudhoney type role on the soundtrack would be theoretical sound would be kind of cool. They also have a hit with Q-Tip that got nominated for a Grammy back in 2013 called Nakamura, so they'd be cool here. As Havoc as a thrash metal band, Dysrhythmia, Piron, Turnstile. I'd say them. They're the biggest hardcore punk band in the world right now. A bunch of young kids from Baltimore who are excellent. So I think they'd be, and they're kind of coming up and kind of progressing in their career. They were on a cover of Spin last year, so they'd be cool. And last but not least, Nickelback. I had to. I'm just trolling there. No, not Nickelback. Although it would be funny because I think Nickelback is in on a joke now, and it would be funny.
I'll buy in. Sorry, go ahead, finish.
I
I'll
don't
let
know.
you finish your Nickelback.
Yeah, just have Nickelback on here, but it would just be like in a theoretical world. Let's say Don, you could bring Don LaFontaine back from dead, and for any of you who don't know, he was the movie preview guy. In a world where two guys are going to talk about a soundtrack, 27 years old, late at night. One person is coming back from the dead to advertise a fictional album. That will never happen. But it'd be funny to see Don LaFontaine or somebody, like the Don LaFontaine equivalent, be like, featured on this album, Travis Scott, Eminem, Nicki Minaj, Jay-Z, Lizzo, and Nickelback. You kind of like that. Yeah.
I would check out the Nicki Minaj and the Locust tracks just for shits and giggles.
Oh, I think it would be hilarious, and for all those who don't know the Locust,
I would just like to see her face when she walks in the studio and they're thrashing around.
And they're like, and they're in full Locust attire, like they're not like they're wearing like the luchador masks and everything like that. Yeah.
That would be a nice sight to behold.
It's like an internet meme. You could throw Betty White in there for why? Because Betty White makes everything funnier. It's like you throw Betty White in. Yeah.
All right. I think at that point we've probably reached our max here on the podcast where we're making Betty White references.
I do have one or two more things to talk about, just really quickly. Just some losses in the music world recently. I think it's important to talk about. This has been a tough year for drummers, especially. Neil Peart from Rush earlier in the year, Reed Mullin from Corrosion and Conformity, and many others. Last week we lost Tony Allen, who was Fela Kuti's drummer for a long time. He worked with Damon Albarn and also Flea on projects like The Good, the Bad, and the Queen, and Rocket Juice and the Moon. The legendary drummer, Fela Kuti, very influential. And a lot of that music, like a lot of the funk that came to the West, like Talking Heads, Chili Peppers, Minutemen, these groups that I mentioned earlier, and kind of combining soul music, he played a big part in that groove and the foundation of that. So rest in peace. Thank you to Tony Allen for his contributions. And also earlier today, we found out Florian Schneider, one of the founders of Kraftwerk, passed away. And Kraftwerk was also you talk about interesting, influential, innovative bands. They were taking like weird, synth, basically any piece of equipment that could make melody and just putting it on albums and doing fun stuff with it in the 70s at a time when they didn't have the technology that they have now. And so, rest in peace to both those gentlemen.
It's also the keyboardist for the Stranglers.
Good call, yeah.
I'm drawing a blank on his name. Sorry, I just...
let's Google it because definitely want to give him.
You Google it. We want to mention his name, but yeah, I mean, I started listening to some of the Stranglers tracks that I love after I heard, and it's like, man, it really stands out. I knew he was a big part of the group, but it's like he's bigger than I even realized. So many of the tracks are like, it's such an integral part of the songs. Like really, like without him. I remember some of the band members from reading the post were saying it's nothing, not hyperbole to call this guy a genius. And really, you can get that sense from reading the tracks.
Dave Greenfield.
Yes, that's it. I apologize. It did not remember it, but yes.
So that's all I got. It's fun to talk about Judgment Night, talk about a little bit about music history. Hopefully we got something out of this. Hopefully people laughed, and whether they see this tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, or after the post-apocalyptic future when aliens have come. No, but whenever people see this, especially now, hopefully it brings a little bit of joy and just people can get away from their situations and the whole global situation right now. And hopefully we'll bring some positivity, some education, some fun, self-deprecating humor. And at some point, we'll all get back out there and get life will presume as normal, and we'll go to concerts and all that fun stuff again soon.
Yeah. All right, everybody out of the pool.
Anything else to add or anything? Just that's it.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
That's all.
Thanks everybody for checking in. This is our first one, so everything will be getting sharper as we go along.
Right.
And I hope you found some fun out of this and got some enjoyment, some laughs, and maybe some knowledge too.
Yeah, and tell us what you think about it. And as I mentioned, give your Instagram handle again.
Oh, I'm Mummies on Main Street.
Mummies on Main Street, and Method Mike A. Tell us about, and in the YouTube comments when this goes up, if you think we're right about these tracks, if you think we don't know what the fuck we're talking about, or if you have people, if you have people, well, it would have been great to get this person on this thing, and hopefully someday in the future using AI we can get this O.D.B and Primus crossover going. All right.
If nothing else comes out of this, then at least that.
All right. Take care. Good night. Stay safe. And, live long and prosper. Star Trek reference number 3, motherfucker. I got it in there. That's right.